definite plans of action, and directed to a definite end. The missing link in all systems of education is that educational institutions fail to teach their students how to organize and use the knowledge after they have acquired it. Many people made the mistake of assuming that because Henry Ford had little schooling, he was not a man of education. Those who made this mistake did not understand the real meaning of the word educate. That word is derived from the Latin word educo, meaning to educe, to draw out, or to develop from within. An educated person is not necessarily one who has an abundance of general or specialized knowledge. An educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind that he or she may acquire anything they want, or its equivalent, without violating the rights of others. During the World War, a Chicago newspaper published editorials in which, among other statements, Henry Ford was called an ignorant pacifist. Mr. Ford objected to the statements and sued the paper for libeling him. When the suit was tried in the courts, the attorneys for the paper called Mr. Ford to the witness stand for the purpose of proving to the jury that he was ignorant. They asked Mr. Ford a great variety of questions. All of them intended to prove that while he might possess considerable specialized knowledge about manufacturing automobiles, he was in the main ignorant. Mr. Ford was asked such questions as, who was Benedict Arnold, and how many soldiers did the British send over to America to put down the rebellion of 1776? In answer to the last question, Mr. Ford replied, I do not know the exact number of soldiers the British sent over, but I have heard that it was a considerably larger number than ever went back. Finally, Mr. Ford became tired of this line of questioning. In reply to a particularly offensive question, he leaned over, pointed his finger at the lawyer who had asked the question, and said, If I should really want to answer the foolish question you have just asked, or any of the other questions you have been asking me, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button I can summon to my aid men who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting most of my efforts. Now, will you kindly tell me why I should clutter up my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have men around me who can supply any knowledge I require? That answer floored the lawyer. Every person in the courtroom realized it was the answer not of an ignorant man, but of a man of education. Any person is educated who knows where to get knowledge when they need it and how to organize that knowledge into definite plans of action. Through the assistance of his MasterMind group, Henry Ford had at his command all the specialized knowledge he needed to become one of the wealthiest men in America. It was not essential that he have this knowledge in his own mind. You can get all the knowledge you need. Before you can transmute your desire into money, you will require specialized knowledge of the service, merchandise, or profession that you intend to offer in return for fortune. Perhaps you may need much more specialized knowledge than you have the ability or the inclination to acquire. If this is true, you may bridge your weakness through the aid of your MasterMind group. The MasterMind is defined as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. The larger meaning of the MasterMind group is explained in greater detail in later chapters. Editor's comments. After reading Hill's definition of the MasterMind, many people may assume that he is describing teamwork. That would not be correct. The following explanation is adapted from the Napoleon Hill Foundation's book, Believe and Achieve. Teamwork can be achieved by any group, even one whose members have disparate interests, because all it requires is cooperation. In teamwork, people might simply be cooperating because they like the leader or out of a sense of duty. Some team members will give 100% to any team that pays them enough, but they have little concern about the objective. And sometimes there is good teamwork because different members have different agendas. A board of directors may disagree, even be unfriendly, and still run a business successfully. Musical groups are made up of notoriously self-centered people who work as a team if it will help them get ahead. Masterminds, on the other hand, are formed of individuals who have the same agenda, a deep sense of mission, and commitment to the same goal. Masterminds represent the highest order of thinking by a group of knowledgeable people, each contributing their absolute best according to their abilities, expertise, and background. If you have ever been a part of a meeting when everything just clicked and ideas built upon other ideas, with each member contributing until out of the group activity came the best possible idea or solution, that was a mastermind at work. Napoleon Hill believed that you must make the mastermind experience a regular part of your life if you really want to succeed. How to select the right people for your mastermind will be discussed further in Chapter 11, The Power of the Mastermind. This is the end of the editor's comment. The accumulation of great fortunes calls for power, and power is acquired through highly organized and intelligently directed specialized knowledge. That knowledge does not, necessarily, have to be in the possession of the person who accumulates the fortune. This should give hope and encouragement to those who want to accumulate a fortune, but don't have the necessary education to supply such specialized knowledge. People sometimes go through life suffering from inferiority complexes because they are not people of education. The person who can organize and direct a mastermind group of people who possess the knowledge needed is just as much a person of education as any other individual in the group. Thomas A. Edison had only 3 months of schooling during his entire life, but he did not lack education. Neither did he die poor. Henry Ford had less than a 6th grade schooling, but he managed to do pretty well by himself financially. Albert Einstein was working as a clerk in a patent office when he began to develop his world-altering scientific theories. Editor's comments. Had Einstein been born today, he might have been diagnosed in his early years as having attention deficit disorder. As a child, he was slow to learn to talk. As a student, he showed little promise and was expelled from at least one school. But what Einstein could do was to focus his concentration on a goal of his choice. His famous theories were the result of thought experiments that took place inside his mind. It is said that the breakthrough which led him to the theory of relativity came not from specialized knowledge of physics or mathematics, but from his ability to imagine what would happen if he were riding on a beam of starlight through space. This is the end of the editor's comments. Specialized knowledge is among the most plentiful and the cheapest forms of service that may be had. If you doubt this, consult the payroll of any university. It pays to know how to purchase knowledge, and it pays to know where to look. First of all, decide the sort of specialized knowledge you require and the purpose for which it is needed. To a large extent, your major purpose in life, the goal toward which you are working, will help determine what knowledge you need. Your next move requires that you have accurate information concerning dependable sources of knowledge. The more important of these are your own experience and education, experience and education available through cooperation of others, Mastermind Alliance, colleges and universities, public libraries, and even easier, the Internet, special training courses through night schools and home study courses in particular. As knowledge is acquired, it must be organized and put into use for a definite purpose through practical plans. Knowledge has no value except for what can be gained from its application toward some worthy end. Successful people never stop acquiring specialized knowledge related to their major purpose, business, or profession. Those who are not successful usually make the mistake of believing that the knowledge-acquiring period ends when you finish school. The truth is that schools do little more than teach you how to acquire practical knowledge. Editor's comments. At this point in the original edition of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill included a newspaper story about education and job opportunities. Although the contemporary job market has changed considerably, the author of the article, Robert Moore, Director of Placements at Columbia University, made some comments that are perfectly aligned with the philosophy of Think and Grow Rich and are still holding true today. One such comment was, "The man who has been active on the campus, whose personality is such that he gets along with all kinds of people, and who has done an adequate job with his studies, has a most decided edge over the strictly academic student." One of the largest industrial companies, the leader in its field, in writing to Mr. Moore concerning prospective seniors at the college said, "We emphasize qualities of character, intelligence, and personality far more than specific educational background." Although few would argue that education is valuable, as Moore implies above and as Hill noted earlier about Edison, Ford, and Einstein, academic accomplishment has never been a sure indicator of success. The October 27, 2003 issue of Time magazine made a similar point in their cover story about the changes being made in the SAT exam. Although the article's primary focus is on the efforts to make the SAT less biased, it also notes that recent research indicates that neither the SAT nor IQ tests have proven to be very reliable predictors of future real-world achievement. In his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence, author Daniel Goleman has created a persuasive argument that the way in which a person handles themselves and their relationships, which he calls emotional intelligence, or EI, is a much better indicator than IQ in predicting whether a person will be successful in life. In his later books, Working with Emotional Intelligence and Primal Leadership, Goleman applies his theory to the workplace, focusing on emotional intelligence leadership techniques and comparing corporate managers' EI with their IQ to analyze which has the greatest positive effect on the financial bottom line. Daniel Goleman's theories have caused some significant changes within educational circles and among management theorists, but their greatest impact has been on individuals who have gone through life intimidated because they believe they aren't smart enough. For them, Goleman's books offer convincing evidence that although they may not have conventional education, their natural abilities and interpersonal skills can be far more important in achieving success. This is the end of the editor's comments. One of the most reliable and practical sources of knowledge available to those who need specialized schooling are night schools, extension courses, and seminars. The correspondence schools give specialized training anywhere the U.S. mails go, or via the Internet. One advantage of home study training is the flexibility of the study program, which permits you to study during spare time. Another advantage of home study training, if the school is carefully chosen, is that most courses offer some method of personal consultation, which can be of priceless value to those needing specialized knowledge. No matter where you live, you can share the benefits. A lesson from a collection agency. Anything acquired without effort and without cost is generally unappreciated and often discredited. Perhaps this is why we get so little from our marvelous opportunity in public schools. The self-discipline you will learn from a program of specialized study can make up for the wasted opportunity when knowledge was available without cost. Being asked to pay, whether you make good grades or poor, has the effect of causing you to follow through with the course when you would otherwise drop it. I learned this from experience when I enrolled for a home study course in advertising. After completing 8 or 10 lessons, I stopped studying, but the school did not stop sending me bills. In fact, they insisted upon payment whether I kept up my studies or not. I decided that if I had to pay for the course, which I had legally obligated myself to do, I should complete the lessons and get my money's worth. Correspondence schools are well-organized businesses. At the time, I felt that their collection system was somewhat too well organized, but I learned later in life that it was a valuable part of my education. The truth is that their collection department constituted the very finest sort of training on decision-making, promptness, and the habit of finishing what you begin. The collection system that forced me to finish the course turned out to be worth much in the form of money earned. The road to specialized knowledge. We have in this country what is said to be the greatest public school system in the world. One of the strange things about human beings is that they value only that which has a price. The free schools of America and the free public libraries do not impress people because they are free. This is the major reason why so many people find it necessary to acquire additional training after they finish school and go to work. It is also one of the major reasons why employers give greater consideration to employees who take specialized training courses. They have learned that those who have the ambition to give up a part of their spare time to studying at home have in them those qualities that make for leadership. There is one weakness in people for which there is no remedy. It is the universal weakness of lack of ambition. People who give up some of their spare time to take courses seldom remain at the bottom very long. By taking such courses, they open the way for the upward climb, remove many obstacles from their path, and attract the interest of those who have the power to help them. The home study method of training is especially suited to people who have already started working. They often find that after having left school, they still need additional specialized knowledge, but cannot spare the time to go back to school. Stuart Austin Weir was a construction engineer. He followed this line of work until the Depression hit and severely limited the construction business. He took inventory of himself and decided to change his profession to law. He went back to school and took special courses to prepare himself as a corporation lawyer. He completed his training, passed the bar examination, and quickly built a lucrative law practice as a patent attorney. Just to keep the record straight, and to anticipate the excuses of those who will say, "I couldn't go to school because I have a family to support," or "I'm too old," I will add that Mr. Weir was past 40 and married when he went back to school. Moreover, by carefully selecting highly specialized courses, Mr. Weir completed in 2 years the work that it takes the majority of law students 4 years to do. It pays to know how to purchase knowledge. A simple idea that paid off. Here's another specific example about a salesman in a grocery store who found himself suddenly unemployed. Having had some bookkeeping experience, he took a special course in accounting, familiarized himself with all the latest bookkeeping and office equipment, and went into business for himself. Starting with a grocer for whom he had formerly worked, he made contracts with more than 100 small merchants to keep their books at a very nominal monthly fee. His idea was so practical that he soon found it necessary to set up a portable accounting office in a light delivery truck. He now has a fleet of these bookkeeping offices on wheels. He employs a large staff of assistants who provide small merchants with accounting services equal to the best that money can buy at very nominal cost. Specialized knowledge plus imagination were the ingredients that went into this unique and successful business. Last year, the owner of that business paid income taxes of almost 10 times as much as was paid by the grocery store that fired him. Editor's comments. It would be impossible to write a contemporary book about success without including the story of Bill Gates. And although the connection between the world's wealthiest man and Hill's story about a man who started a mobile accounting business may not be immediately obvious, the fact is that this is a very apt place to include the story of Microsoft. Just as with the mobile accountant, the two defining characteristics of Bill Gates' success are specialized knowledge and imagination. Everyone had recognized at an early age that Bill Gates was a very bright student, but he had little interest in anything other than science and math. And when the mothers group at his school arranged for the students to learn about computing, that became his passion. By the time he was 13, he taught himself computer programming. And throughout high school and his years at university, his life revolved around computer clubs and odd jobs working for companies that had something to do with computers. Although at various times he toyed with the idea of a career in science or law, it is probably fair to say that while he was still in school, Bill Gates knew, in general terms, what his burning desire in life would be. He paid little attention to general knowledge, but devoted himself to assembling the specialized knowledge he would need to achieve his definite major purpose. Gates' burning desire heated up the day his friend and fellow computer club member Paul Allen bought a copy of the January 1975 issue of Popular Electronics. On the cover was a picture of an inexpensive desktop computer, the Altair 8800, which could be built from a kit. Gates and Allen knew in their gut that there were other students just like them who would love to get their hands on one of these things. At the time, it took a lot of imagination to foresee the impact computers might have on the average person. And even though they didn't own an Altair, they decided they could write a computer program for it. That took even more imagination. They contacted Ed Roberts, the founder of the company that made the Altair, and pitched their idea. Roberts told them he was getting offers from all over, and his policy was that whoever wrote it first would get the job. For the next 2 months, they tore apart the manual, gleaning the specialized knowledge they would need to write the program. They were the first to deliver a workable operating system, and Roberts bought it from them for $3,000 plus a royalty on sales. With their vision of the future burning in their imaginations, Gates and Allen used the advance and their royalties to launch a company that would be in the business of writing computer programs. They named their new company Microsoft and called old friends from their high school computer club to staff it. Bill Gates was 19 and Paul Allen was only a few years older. They and about 9 of their friends started writing programs for Apple Computer, Commodore, and anyone else who would contract with the company for their services. For the next 5 years, Bill Gates and Paul Allen had their share of imaginative ideas, but mostly they concentrated on learning the specialized knowledge needed to run and grow a successful business. Then in 1980, IBM, which had finally decided to get into the small computer business, needed help getting up to speed. They approached Microsoft to write an operating system for the new computer venture. Once again, specialized knowledge and imagination were the qualities that guided Bill Gates. In their imagination, Gates and Allen could see an even bigger future than before, and through specialized knowledge of what computers were capable of, they knew the role they could play in that future. They then made 2 business moves that are the foundation of the Microsoft success. First, because IBM had such a tight schedule, Gates went to a computer programmer, Tim Patterson, and bought from him a rudimentary but already developed operating system. Gates then set to work modifying the system, and he renamed it MS-DOS, for Microsoft Disk Operating System. The other move that was crucial to their success was the negotiation with IBM. They started from the position that they would not sell an operating system to IBM. What they would do was license the system to IBM in exchange for a royalty on every copy sold with an IBM computer. And it would not be an exclusive license, which meant that Microsoft could also license the system to other computer companies. If you were to continue to track the history of Microsoft, you would find those same qualities: a burning desire, an idea, specialized knowledge, and imagination behind each move Bill Gates made and continues to make, just as they were behind the success of the man who started the mobile accounting business. This is the end of the editor's comments. The beginning of the successful mobile accounting business was an idea. I know this is true because I was the one who gave him that idea. Now I'd like to pass on the story of another idea. And it was my accountant friend who indirectly suggested this one to me. When I first proposed the accounting idea to him, he said, "I like the idea, but I would not know how to turn it into cash." In other words, he did not know how to market his bookkeeping knowledge after he had acquired it. So, with the aid of a young woman copywriter, a very attractive presentation was prepared describing the advantages of the new system of bookkeeping. The brochure told the story of this new business so effectively that its owner soon had more accounts than he could handle. There are thousands of people all over the country who need the services of a merchandising specialist capable of preparing an attractive way to market personal services. This idea was born of the necessity to solve a specific problem. But it did not stop by serving merely one person. The woman who created the presentation has a keen imagination. She saw in her newly born brainchild the making of a new profession to serve thousands of people who need practical guidance in marketing personal services. Spurred to action by the success of her first prepared plan to market personal services, This woman turned to solving a similar problem for her son. He had just finished college, but had been totally unable to find a market for his services. The plan she created for him was the best example of merchandising personal services I have ever seen. When the presentation had been completed, it contained nearly 50 pages of beautifully typed, properly organized information. It told the story of her son's natural abilities, schooling, personal experiences, and a great variety of other information. The book also contained a complete description of the position her son desired, together with a marvelous word picture of the exact plan he would use in filling his position. The preparation of the presentation required several weeks of her time, during which she sent her son to the public library almost daily to get specific data needed to sell his services to best advantage. She also sent him to all the competitors of his prospective employer, where he gathered information concerning their business methods. This was of great value in the formation of the plan he intended to use in filling the position he sought. When the plan was finished, it contained more than half a dozen very fine suggestions that would benefit the prospective employer. You don't have to start at the bottom. You may be inclined to ask, why go to all this trouble to secure a job? The answer is, doing a thing well is never trouble. The plan prepared by this woman for her son helped him get the job at the first interview and at a salary fixed by himself. Moreover, and this too is important, the position did not require the young man to start at the bottom. He began as a junior executive at an executive salary. Why go to all this trouble? Well, for one thing, this young man's planned presentation saved him no less than 10 years of working his way up. The idea of starting at the bottom and working your way up may appear to be sound, but the major objection to it is this. Too many of those who begin at the bottom never manage to lift their heads high enough to be seen by those who count. And the outlook from the bottom is not very bright or encouraging. It has a tendency to kill off ambition. You get into a rut, and you accept your fate because you form the habit of daily routine. Often this habit finally becomes so strong you don't even try to throw it off. And that is another reason why it pays to start 1 or 2 steps above the bottom. By so doing, you will form the habit of looking around, of observing how others get ahead, of seeing opportunity, and of embracing it without hesitation. A splendid example of what I mean is Dan Halpin. During his college days, he was manager of the famous 1930 championship Notre Dame football team, when it was under the direction of the late Knute Rockne. Halpin finished college at a very unfavorable time. The Depression had made jobs scarce. So after a fling at investment banking and motion pictures, he took the first job with a potential future he could find. It was selling electrical hearing aids on a commission basis. Anyone could start in that sort of job, and Halpin knew it, but it was enough to open the door of opportunity to him. For almost 2 years he worked at the job, but it didn't satisfy him. He would never have risen above that job if he had not done something about his dissatisfaction. He aimed first at the job of assistant sales manager of the company, and he got the job. That single step upward placed him high enough above the crowd for him to see still greater opportunity. Also, it placed him where opportunity could see him. In his new position, he did so well selling hearing aids that A.M. Andrews, chairman of the board of the Dictograph Products Company, a competitor of the company for which Halpin worked, asked to meet with him. Mr. Andrews wanted to know something about that man Dan Halpin, who was taking big sales away from the long-established Dictograph Company. When the interview was over, Halpin was the new sales manager in charge of the Acousticon division of Dictograph. Then, to test young Halpin's mettle, Mr. Andrews went away to Florida for 3 months, leaving him to sink or swim in his new job. He did not sink. Knute Rockne's spirit of all the world loves a winner and has no time for a loser inspired him to put so much into his job that he was elected vice president of the company. Vice president was a job that most would be proud to earn through 10 years of loyal effort, but Halpin turned the trick in little more than 6 months. One of the major points I'm trying to emphasize through this entire philosophy is that we rise to high positions or remain at the bottom because of conditions we can control, but only if we desire to control them. I am also trying to emphasize another point, that both success and failure are largely the results of habit. I have not the slightest doubt that Dan Halpin's close association with the greatest football coach America ever knew planted in his mind the same kind of desire to excel that made the Notre Dame football team world famous. Truly, there's something to the idea that hero worship is helpful, provided you worship a winner. My belief in the theory that business associations are vital factors, both in failure and in success, was clearly demonstrated when my son Blair was negotiating with Dan Halpin for a position. Mr. Halpin offered him a beginning salary of about one-half what he could have gotten from a rival company. I brought parental pressure to bear, and encouraged Blair to accept the job with Mr. Halpin. I believe that close association with people who refuse to compromise with circumstances is an asset that can never be measured in terms of money. The bottom is a monotonous, dreary, unprofitable place for any person. That is why I have taken the time to describe how lowly beginnings can be overcome by proper planning. Make your ideas pay off through specialized knowledge. The woman who prepared the personal service sales plan for her son now receives requests from all parts of the country, from others who want to market their personal services for more money. But don't think that all her plan consists of is clever salesmanship to help her clients get more money for the same services they formerly sold for less. She looks after the interests of the purchaser as well as the seller of personal services. She prepares her plans so that the employers receive full value for the additional money they pay. If you have the imagination and seek a more profitable outlet for your personal services, this suggestion may be the stimulus for which you have been searching. The idea could earn you an income far greater than that of the average doctor, lawyer, or engineer whose education required several years in college. Editor's comments. Mary Kay Ash was literally researching and writing down specialized knowledge when the idea for a new business was born in her imagination. Mary Kay had quit her job as a very successful sales manager in the gift business because she had become discouraged by seeing the men she had trained earning more and being promoted ahead of her. She decided to write an advice book for career women, but as she assembled the knowledge women would need to get ahead, she realized she was writing a business plan for the kind of business she would like to run. She took her life savings of $5,000, went out and found a skincare cream she liked, acquired the rights to it, and began to contact her friends and friends of friends to see if they would like to be beauty consultants for her new company. But what she was offering wasn't just a chance to sell skincare products. It was a very imaginative combination of philosophy and opportunity that gave women the chance to achieve both personal satisfaction and financial success. The company showed a modest profit in its first year, and continued to grow each year until, by the beginning of the 21st century, there were over 1 million independent beauty consultants in 30 countries with wholesale sales of more than $1.5 billion. 3 times Mary Kay Cosmetics was named as one of the 100 best companies to work for in America, and Lifetime Television Network named Mary Kay the businesswoman of the century. She became one of the most in-demand motivational speakers and the best-selling author of 3 books. Neil Balter also started his company based on specialized knowledge and imagination. He got his specialized knowledge from his job as a carpenter's apprentice. His imagination came into play the day he was hired by a customer who wanted to clear up a messy closet by having shelves installed. Now that kind of job must have been offered to thousands of carpenters, but not one of them had the imagination to see in it what Neil Balter saw. When he finished the work, Balter didn't just see nicely fitted shelves. He saw that he had created a solution for a problem that was common to every household in America. He took the money he earned from the job and started his own business, California Closet Company, which specialized in shelves and fittings designed to attractively organize closet space for maximum efficiency. But Balter's imagination didn't stop once he had his own business up and running. Now he could imagine an even bigger operation. So he went out to find new specialized knowledge about operating and franchising a business. Neil Balter had licensed more than 100 California Closet franchises when Williams-Sonoma offered to buy the company for $12 million. Lillian Vernon's specialized knowledge was in an area that many women had, but they didn't have the imagination she had. To quote from her autobiography, An Eye for Winners, handbags. I knew about those, why not sell them? And belts to match. Didn't every teenage girl strolling along the street anywhere in the United States sport a handbag and belt? And my handbags would offer something special. Each one would be personalized with initials. I knew with absolute certainty that teenagers would go for items that made them feel unique. She believed enough in her idea that she spent $495 to take a small ad in 17 magazine. The ad brought in $32,000 in orders. That was when Lillian Vernon started to gather other specialized knowledge about renting space, manufacturing products, warehousing, and shipping, all of which she'd need to grow her idea of bags and belts into a direct response business featuring a whole array of distinctively monogrammed items. Within a few years, she needed more specialized knowledge about product photography, layout, printing, and direct mail, as she imagined having her own catalog. She started by mailing a 16-page black-and-white catalog to 125,000 customers who had bought products from her in the past. At the beginning of the 21st century, Lillian Vernon was still picking the merchandise and overseeing the design of her catalogs, many of which now run well over 100 full-color pages, are mailed to millions of people many times each year, and generate approximately $250 million in annual sales. There is another story about gathering specialized knowledge that is so good we will use it to conclude this editorial comment. It actually comes from the Napoleon Hill archives, and although he did not include it in Think and Grow Rich, he often used it as an example in his lectures and seminars. There was a young man who started out working for the railroad in 1893 as a machinist at 5 cents an hour. He was always taking courses and learning what he could about steam engines, and by 1905 he had worked his way up through the ranks until he was superintendent of motive power for Chicago Great Western in Oelwein, Iowa. Then he did something that must have made his friends think he had taken leave of his senses. He was attending the Chicago Automobile Show when a red and white locomobile caught his attention. He put up his life savings of $700 and convinced a friend to co-sign a loan for $4,300 so he could buy the car. He promptly took it home, put it into a shed, jacked it up, and proceeded to take it apart piece by piece. Then he put it back together again. Then he took it apart and put it back together again. After doing that a few more times, he had learned what he wanted to know. And that was how Walter P. Chrysler gathered the specialized knowledge he needed to get himself out of railroading and into the automobile business. This is the end of the editor's comment. There is no fixed price for sound ideas. Behind all ideas is specialized knowledge. But remember, specialized knowledge is more abundant and more easily acquired than ideas. Because of this truth, there are ever-increasing opportunities for the person capable of helping men and women sell their personal services. Capability means imagination, the one quality needed to combine specialized knowledge with ideas to create organized plans that will yield riches. If you have imagination, this chapter may present you with an idea that is the beginning of the riches you desire. Remember, that we can imagine. Through the aid of imagination, we have discovered and harnessed more of nature's forces during the past 50 years than during the entire history of the human race previous to that time. And even with all we have accomplished, we have come nowhere near the limit of what we are capable. Our only limitation, within reason, lies in the development and use of our imagination. The human imagination offers so much possibility, it is as though we have merely discovered that we have an imagination, and have just started to use it in a very elementary way. Two forms of imagination. The imaginative faculty functions in two forms. One is known as synthetic imagination, and the other as creative imagination. Editor's comments. In modern usage, the word synthetic has taken on a negative connotation, implying that something is artificial, not the real thing. Today the word synthesized, which is defined as something made up from component parts, would better describe what Hill had in mind, and has been substituted here accordingly. This is the end of the editor's comment. Synthesized imagination. Through this faculty, you arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. Synthesized imagination does not create anything. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. It is the faculty used by most inventors, with the exception of those geniuses who draw upon the creative imagination when they cannot solve problems through synthesized imagination. Creative imagination. Through the faculty of creative imagination, the finite human mind has direct communication with infinite intelligence, the faculty through which hunches and inspirations are received. It is by this faculty that all basic or new ideas are handed over to mankind. It is through this faculty that we pick up vibes from other people, and in that way one individual may tune in or communicate with the subconscious minds of others. This concept is explained in greater detail later. The creative imagination works automatically, but only when your conscious mind is motivated, energized, and working at such a high rate that it becomes very perceptive and receptive, such as when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. The great leaders of business, industry, and finance, and the great artists, musicians, poets, and writers became great because they developed the faculty of creative imagination. Editor's comment. At this point, it should be noted that both kinds of imagination are equally valuable to you, and they work together so seamlessly it is often hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. For instance, when Jeff Bezos created the idea of Amazon.com, was it synthesized imagination or creative imagination? At the time, many people were getting onto the idea of the Internet as a sales medium. From this, it could be concluded that he was drawing upon experience, education, and observation, which would mean he was using synthesized imagination. But why did he decide to sell books? Was that synthesized or creative? Did that idea come out of something in his subconscious that just felt like books were the right thing? And what about that name? Calling a bookstore Amazon didn't make sense to anyone but Bezos, but it certainly caught the public's attention. How important was the name in the store's success? Was that choice creative or synthesized? Now take it a step further. What about eBay? Amazon had already shown that you could sell a lot of goods on the Internet. When Pierre Omidyar hit on the idea of selling things on the Internet by turning it into an auction house, what part was synthesized and what part was creative? The answer is, it doesn't matter. Whether you are consciously assembling the parts of a plan, or if subconsciously the pieces fall into place and suddenly hit you in a flash of inspiration, all that matters is that you are putting your imagination to work. And the more you use it, the better both the synthesized and the creative will work for you. This is the end of the editor's comment. Desire is a thought, an impulse. It is nebulous and ephemeral. It is abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart. While the synthesized imagination is the one that will be used most frequently in the process of transforming desire into money, there will be circumstances and situations that demand the use of the creative imagination as well. Both the synthesized and the creative imagination become more alert and receptive with use. And though your imaginative faculty may have become weak through lack of use, you can revive it. Just as any muscle or organ of the body develops the more it is used, your imagination also becomes more receptive in direct response to the amount that you use it. Use your synthesized imagination. First, let us focus attention on the development of the synthesized imagination. This is the faculty that you will use more often in converting desire into money. Transformation of the intangible impulse of desire into the tangible reality of money calls for the use of a plan or plans. To make plans, you must use your imagination. Mainly, this will require you to use your synthesized imagination as you draw upon your experience, your education, and your observations. Editor's comment. The following is adapted from Hill's later writing and appears in Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success. An excellent example of synthesized imagination is Edison's invention of the light bulb. He began with one recognized fact that other people had discovered. A wire could be heated by electricity until it produced light. The problem was that the intense heat quickly burned the wire out, and the light never lasted more than a few minutes. Edison failed more than 10,000 times in his attempt to control this heat. When he found the method, it was by applying another common fact that had simply eluded everyone else. He realized that charcoal is produced by setting wood on fire, covering it with soil, and allowing the fires to smolder. The soil permits only enough air to reach the fire to keep it burning without blazing, and that way the wood isn't burned up. When Edison recognized this fact, his imagination immediately associated it with the idea of heating the wire. He placed the wire inside a bottle, pumped out most of the air, and produced the first incandescent light. It burned for 8.5 hours. Everything that Edison used to make the electric light was widely known, but the way he synthesized the knowledge changed the world and made him a very wealthy man. W. Clement Stone called the process the R2A2 formula: recognize and relate, assimilate and apply. If you do that with everything you see, hear, think, and experience, it will give you a new way of looking at familiar things. If you do that, you can achieve what others believe is impossible. Later in this chapter, you will read of other fortunes that grew from even simpler synthesized ideas, and these stories should lead you to conclude that the combination of ideas is nothing that you couldn't have thought of yourself. That alone should start your own imagination synthesizing ideas. However, even though these stories will inspire you, and you will be anxious to get started, this is not yet the point for you to start making plans. Here, and throughout Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill reminds the reader that this book is meant to be read all the way through before beginning to put the philosophy into practice. There are other ideas to be assimilated from later chapters that will influence your imagination and therefore affect the plans you may develop. This is the end of the editor's comments. Read the entire book through. Then come back to this chapter and begin to put your imagination to work on the building of a plan for transforming your desire into money. Examples and instructions for creating plans are given in almost every chapter. Carry out the instructions that are best suited to your needs and put your plan in writing. The moment you complete this, you will have definitely given concrete form to your intangible desire. Now, read that sentence once more in a slightly different way. The moment I put my plan in writing, I will have definitely given concrete form to my desire. Now read it aloud and realize what you are telling yourself. Desire is only a thought. Through synthesized imagination, your experience, education, and observations will give it shape, form, and action. From the moment you follow those instructions and write out your desire and your plan, you will have actually taken the first of a series of steps that will enable you to convert the thought into its physical counterpart. Editor's comments. Synthesized imagination plays a role in every phase of a business plan. In fact, some of the most successful companies actually get started from synthesized imagination. When an entrepreneur, drawing upon his or her education, experience, and observations, takes an idea from one source and gives it a new application. That is exactly what happened with Ruth Handler. She and her husband, along with another partner, had started a small manufacturing company which had evolved into toy manufacturing. The success of their business depended on coming up with new toy ideas. Watching her young daughter at play, Ruth Handler noticed that she was fascinated with cutout books that featured teenage girl or career women paper dolls that she could cut out clothes for. She also knew that little girls loved to play dress-up in grown-up clothes. These ideas, drawn from Ruth Handler's education, experience, and observations, synthesized themselves in her imagination and came together as a new idea. Ruth Handler announced that they should make a lifelike teenage girl doll. Not a paper doll, but a real three-dimensional grown-up doll with a woman's figure, and they could also make grown-up clothes to fit it, so that girls could play dress-up with the doll. In honor of the source of inspiration, Ruth Handler named the new doll after her daughter, Barbie. As obvious as it seems now, until Ruth Handler, no one had the imagination to make and market a doll that looked like a woman, and certainly no one had ever made endless collections of tiny women's fashions for a doll to wear. Previously, we mentioned Jeff Bezos creating Amazon by combining the idea of a bookstore with the Internet, and Pierre Omidyar doing the same thing with auctions when he launched eBay. Mary Kay Ash took the idea of women running their own businesses and added the idea of door-to-door sales. Anita Roddick took the trend of all-natural ingredients, combined it with cosmetics, and created the body shop empire. Bernard Marcus and Arthur Blank took the concept of the supermarket, combined it with hardware, and created Home Depot. Thomas Stemberg and Leo Kahn did the same thing with office supplies and launched Staples. Once the connections are made, it may seem obvious, but making these supposedly obvious connections has brought success to many people. Napoleon Hill says imagination is like a muscle that can be strengthened through use. Just as there are specific exercises that will build and improve physical muscles, specific exercises have been developed to improve and build imagination, and it is commonly accepted that creativity developed in one area will affect your creativity in others. Dr. Edward de Bono, one of the most highly regarded experts in the field, has written more than 25 books, including the bestsellers Lateral Thinking and 6 Thinking Hats, that are literally designed to make you think. Dr. Betty Edwards' bestseller, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, uses drawing techniques to awaken creativity. Dr. Gabrielle Rico's bestseller, Writing the Natural Way, uses a technique called clustering as a way to break writer's block. And Tony Buzan uses a similar method for opening your mind that he terms mind mapping. In their bestseller, Super Learning, Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder show ways to use classical music, and Roger Von Eck suggests puzzles and riddles as stimuli in A Whack on the Side of the Head. This is the end of the editor's comments. Tapping into creative imagination. The earth on which you live, you yourself, and every other material thing are the result of evolutionary change, through which bits of matter have been organized and arranged in an orderly fashion. As far as science has been able to determine, the entire universe consists of but 2 things, matter and energy. Moreover, and this statement is of stupendous importance, this earth, every one of the billions of individual cells of your body, and every subatomic particle of matter began as an intangible form of energy. Through the combination of energy and matter has been created everything perceptible, from the largest star in the heavens down to and including man himself. Desire is a thought impulse. Thought impulses are forms of energy. When you begin the process of acquiring money by using the thought impulse of desire, you are drafting into your service the same stuff that nature used in creating this earth, as well as every material form in the universe, including your body and your brain, in which the thought impulses function. Editor's comments. Although recent developments in physics, gauge theory, string theory, membrane theory, and others, have advanced our understanding of matter and energy, Hill's preceding description remains in accord with modern science. The newer theories are variations on and refinements of the basic concept that everything in the universe is either space, time, matter, or energy. And as Einstein stated, energy and matter are in fact different forms of the same thing. As Hill says, everything from the stars to the solar system to the earth, to you, your brain, and that little spark called a thought, are all the same stuff. As when a tablecloth is spread out, there are folds and bumps in the fabric that are all different from each other, but they are all still tablecloth. Like the folds and bumps in the tablecloth, energy and matter are the same thing in different forms. Therefore you, matter, your thoughts, energy, and everybody else, matter, and their thoughts, energy, and all other things, matter, are not just interconnected, but are in essence all the same thing. Hill calls this interrelation of everything to everything else infinite intelligence. In the chapter on faith, he made his first mention of infinite intelligence being the source of hunches, intuition, and flashes of inspiration. In the chapter on autosuggestion, he proposed that the subconscious mind is the connection with infinite intelligence. In this chapter, Hill elaborates that creative imagination is the receiver through which these flashes of insight come to us from infinite intelligence. Under some circumstances, when your mind is operating at a high rate, your creative intelligence receives not just an idea, but also a flash of intuition. You get a hunch or a premonition about something or somebody. That flash could not come from your conscious or your subconscious because neither ever had the information. Because everything is a part of everything else, your creative imagination, energy, pulled the thought, energy, directly from the common pool of infinite intelligence, energy, that contains not just your subconscious, energy, but all other subconscious minds, energy, as well. Infinite intelligence is a complex concept, and for those readers who find themselves questioning the process, be assured that Hill expands on the theory in later chapters. The editors advise the reader to set aside any questions for the moment and focus on the logical and practical application Hill had in mind. This is the end of the editor's comments. You are engaged in trying to turn your desire into its physical or monetary counterpart, and there are laws of physics and principles of psychology that can help you. But first, you must give yourself time to become familiar with these laws and learn to use them. Through repetition, and by describing these principles from every conceivable angle, I hope to reveal to you the secret through which every great fortune has been accumulated. Strange and paradoxical as it may seem, the secret is not a secret. It is made obvious in the earth, the stars, the planets, in the elements above and around us, in every blade of grass, and every form of life within our vision. Do not be discouraged if you do not fully understand or accept this theory. I do not expect that you will accept all that is in this chapter on your first reading. Assimilate as much as you can now as you read this for the first time. Later, when you reread and study it, you will discover that something has happened to clarify it and give you a broader understanding of the whole. Above all, do not stop nor hesitate in your study of these principles until you have read the book at least 3 times. Then you will not want to stop. How to make practical use of imagination. Ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. Ideas are products of the imagination. Following are 2 true stories about ideas that have yielded huge fortunes. I hope that these stories will convey how important a role imagination can play in turning an idea into success, and that they will illustrate the method by which imagination may be used in accumulating riches. The Enchanted Kettle. In the late 1880s, an old country doctor drove to town, hitched his horse, quietly slipped into a drugstore by the back door and began dickering with a young drug clerk. For more than an hour behind the prescription counter, the old doctor and the clerk talked in low tones. Then the doctor left. He went out to the buggy and brought back a large old-fashioned kettle, a big wooden paddle, used for stirring the contents of the kettle, and deposited them in the back of the store. The clerk inspected the kettle, reached into his inside pocket, took out a roll of bills, and handed it over to the doctor. The roll contained exactly $500, the clerk's entire savings. The doctor handed over a small slip of paper on which was written a secret formula. The words on that small slip of paper were worth a king's ransom, but not to the doctor. Those magic words were needed to start the kettle to boiling, but neither the doctor nor the young clerk knew what fabulous fortunes were destined to flow from that kettle. The old doctor was glad to sell the outfit for $500. The clerk was taking a big chance by staking his entire life savings on a mere scrap of paper and an old kettle. He never dreamed his investment would start a kettle to overflowing with gold that would one day surpass the miraculous performance of Aladdin's lamp. What the clerk really purchased was an idea. The old kettle and the wooden paddle and the secret message on a slip of paper were incidental. The miracle of that kettle only began to take place after the new owner mixed with the secret instructions an ingredient of which the doctor knew nothing. See if you can discover what it was that the young man added to the secret message, which caused the kettle to overflow with gold. Here you have a story of facts stranger than fiction, facts that began in the form of an idea. Just look at the vast fortunes of gold this idea has produced. It has paid, and still pays, huge fortunes to men and women all over the world who distribute the contents of the kettle to millions of people. The old kettle is now one of the world's largest consumers of sugar, thus providing jobs to thousands of men and women engaged in growing sugar cane and in refining and marketing sugar. The old kettle consumes annually millions of bottles and cans, providing jobs to huge numbers of workers. The old kettle gives employment to an army of clerks, stenographers, copywriters, and advertising experts throughout the nation. It has brought fame and fortune to scores of artists who have created magnificent pictures describing the product. The old kettle has converted Atlanta, which was a small southern city, into the business capital of the South, where it now benefits, directly or indirectly, every business and practically every resident of the city. The influence of this idea now benefits every civilized country in the world, pouring out a continuous stream of gold to all who touch it. Gold from the kettle built and maintains one of the most prominent colleges of the South, where thousands of young people receive the training essential for success. If the product of that old brass kettle could talk, it would tell thrilling tales in every language, tales of love, of business, of professional men and women who are daily being stimulated by it. I am sure of at least one such tale of romance, for I was a part of it, and it all began not far from the very spot on which the drug clerk purchased the old kettle. It was there that I met my wife, and it was she who first told me of the enchanted kettle. It was the product of that kettle we were drinking when I asked her to accept me for better or worse. Whoever you are, wherever you may live, whatever your occupation, just remember every time you see the words Coca-Cola that its vast empire of wealth and influence grew out of a single idea. And that idea, the mysterious ingredient the drug clerk, Asa Candler, mixed with a secret formula, was imagination. Stop and think of that for a moment. Keep in mind that the steps to riches described in this book are the very same principles through which the influence of Coca-Cola has been extended to every city, town, village, and crossroads of the world. Now here's the most important thing to remember. The ideas you create may have the possibility of duplicating the enormous success of this worldwide thirst killer. Editor's comments. Harlan Sanders, too, had a recipe in a magic kettle. Actually, his kettle was a pressure cooker, but neither his cooker nor his recipe of 11 herbs and spices would be mentioned here if he didn't also have imagination. Harlan Sanders owned and operated a successful motel and cafe in Corbin, Kentucky. Then, when the new interstate highway came through, it bypassed Sanders' location. In a short time, his business went broke, leaving him with little more than his recipe for fried chicken and a way to make it quickly in a pressure cooker. At 62 years of age, the Colonel, as people called him, had to find a new way to make a living. That's when the magic ingredient, imagination, came in. He decided he wasn't going to sell fried chicken anymore. Instead, he would sell his method for making it. He packed his recipe and cooker into the back of his car and hit the road to demonstrate his fried chicken to other restaurant owners. In the first 2 years, he managed to sell 5 franchises. 2 years later, he'd sold 200. 4 years later, he was up to 600 locations when he was approached by an investment group to sell his company. Recognizing that the magic wasn't just in the kettle or the recipe, the new owners asked Colonel Sanders to stay on as spokesman for the company, which he did until his death in 1980. Today, there are almost 12,000 KFC locations in more than 80 countries with sales of nearly $10 billion a year. Debbie Fields was a 20-year-old housewife who loved to bake cookies. She had no formal education and no business experience, but she had a recipe and an imaginative idea that people would like to buy fresh, hot, soft cookies from a walk-up store. The business people and bankers she approached told her she was crazy, but she and her husband continued to pitch her idea to banker after banker until they finally wore one down enough to give Debbie Fields a loan to open a store in Palo Alto, California. By noon on her first day, she still hadn't sold a cookie, so she went out into the street and gave away samples. That did it. Her walk-in try-a-sample cookie store took off. Today, Mrs. Fields' stores are all across America. Harvard Business School uses her methods as a case study in efficiency, and Debbie Fields has become a best-selling author, an in-demand motivational speaker, and a television personality. Wally Famous Amos was a Los Angeles talent agent who copied a cookie recipe off the back of a bag of Nestle's chocolate chips. He made a few changes to personalize the recipe and started to give out his version of homemade cookies as a sort of calling card. His clients and business associates liked them so much that Wally finally decided to quit show business and open a store. He did it with a Hollywood agent's flair. He opened on Sunset Boulevard with 2,000 invitations, a red carpet, and celebrities. With the same flair, he put his picture on the bag, filled the bags with cookies, and started selling them to exclusive department stores and specialty shops. 10 years later, Famous Amos cookies were a $10 million business. Ray Kroc was over 50 and selling milkshake mixers when he heard about a hamburger stand in California, owned by Dick and Mac McDonald, that was doing great business. He packed his car and headed to San Bernardino to check it out. What he saw was a sit-down restaurant that had a limited menu featuring a good hamburger recipe, and they were serving them faster than any place he'd ever seen. Figuring that if there were more places like this, he could sell them a lot of milkshake mixers, Kroc pitched the McDonald brothers on the idea of opening some more McDonald's. They were interested, but they didn't know who they could get to open the new restaurants. This time, it was a recipe and a magic griddle, but it still needed the extra ingredient, imagination. On the spot, Ray Kroc offered to go into business with them and open the restaurants himself. According to the signs on the golden arches, Ray Kroc's imagination paid off in billions of hamburgers sold. In 1982, Howard Schultz went to work as the director of marketing for a small coffee importer wholesaler called Starbucks, which had only one location in Seattle's Pike Place market. While he was on a trip to Italy, Schultz got the idea that the coffee bar culture he saw in Milan could be transposed to the downtown Seattle scene. He convinced the company to try it. His coffee house idea was such a success that Schultz went out and raised the money to buy the company. 5 years after he'd joined Starbucks, he was CEO of a company that had 17 locations. 15 years later, Schultz's coffee house culture was on every corner of America, and there were more than 7,000 Starbucks worldwide. As a final example of imagination, we offer Paul Newman's salad dressing. Now, it would seem that it doesn't take much imagination for a big celebrity to put his name on a product, and that's what Newman thought too. But when he and his partner, A.E. Hotchner, pitched their salad dressing idea to companies that specialize in marketing foods, nobody was interested unless they would personally put up about $1 million for the first year's operations. According to Newman and Hotchner's book, Shameless Exploitation, they found out that almost all celebrity products in the food business have been disastrous failures, and now nobody would touch them. So when it came to marketing salad dressing, even Paul Newman's big name wasn't the magic they needed. And unless they were willing to put up a ridiculous amount, money wasn't the magic either. The magic would have to be in the imaginative way that they would convince the right people to help them, and in having the perseverance to stick with it until they succeeded. And just like most everyone with an idea, they were told they were crazy to try it. They were turned down by bottling companies that wouldn't do small runs, and they were rejected by distributors who wouldn't take a chance on another celebrity product. In the end, it was one supermarket owner, Stu Leonard, who helped hook them up with the right suppliers. But even that wouldn't have been enough if Stu Leonard hadn't had enough imagination to see the possibilities and agree to put Newman's own salad dressing on the shelves in his store. 15 years later, Newman's Own Brands was a $100 million company, which gives all profits to charity. This is the end of the editor's comments. What I would do if I had $1 million. The following story proves the truth of that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. It was told to me by that beloved educator and clergyman Frank W. Gonzalez, who began his preaching career in the Stockyards region of Chicago. While Dr. Gonzalez was going through college, he observed many defects in our educational system, defects that he believed he could correct if he were the head of a college. He made up his mind to organize a new college in which he could carry out his ideas without being handicapped by orthodox methods of education. He needed $1 million to put the project across. Where was he to lay his hands on so large a sum of money? That was the question that absorbed most of this ambitious young preacher's thought, but he couldn't seem to make any progress. Every night, he took that thought to bed with him. He got up with it in the morning. He took it with him everywhere he went. He turned it over and over in his mind until it became a consuming obsession with him. Being a philosopher as well as a preacher, Dr. Gonzalez recognized, as do all who succeed in life, that definiteness of purpose is the starting point from which one must begin. He recognized, too, that definiteness of purpose takes on life and power when backed by a burning desire to translate that purpose into its material equivalent. He knew all these great truths, yet he did not know where or how to lay his hands on $1 million. The normal thing would have been to give up and quit, saying, well, my idea's a good one, but I can't do anything with it because I can't raise the $1 million. That is exactly what the majority of people would have said, but it is not what Dr. Gonzalez said. What he said, and what he did, are so important that I will now introduce him and let him speak for himself. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my room thinking of ways and means of raising the money to carry out my plans. For nearly 2 years I had been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. The time had come for action. I made up my mind, then and there, that I would get the necessary $1 million within a week. How? I was not concerned about that. The main thing of importance was the decision to get the money within a specified time. I want to tell you that the moment I reached a definite decision to get the money within a specified time, a strange feeling of assurance came over me, such as I had never before experienced. Something inside me seemed to say, "Why didn't you reach that decision a long time ago? The money was waiting for you all the time." I called the newspapers and announced I would preach a sermon the following morning entitled, "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million." I went to work on the sermon immediately, but I must tell you frankly that the task was not difficult because I had been preparing that sermon for almost 2 years. Long before midnight, I had finished writing the sermon. I went to bed and slept with a feeling of confidence, for I could see myself already in possession of the $1 million. Next morning I arose early, went into the bathroom, read the sermon, then knelt on my knees and asked that my sermon might come to the attention of someone who would supply the needed money. While I was praying, I again had that feeling of assurance that the money would be forthcoming. In my excitement, I walked out without my sermon and did not discover the oversight until I was in my pulpit and about ready to begin delivering it. It was too late to go back for my notes, and what a blessing that I couldn't go back. Instead, my own subconscious mind yielded the material I needed. When I arose to begin my sermon, I closed my eyes and spoke with all my heart and soul of my dreams. I not only talked to my audience, but I fancy I talked also to God. I told what I would do with $1 million if that amount were placed in my hands. I described the plan I had in mind for organizing a great educational institution, where young people would learn to do practical things and at the same time develop their minds. When I had finished and sat down, a man slowly arose from his seat, about 3 rows from the rear, and made his way toward the pulpit. I wondered what he was going to do. He came into the pulpit, extended his hand, and said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said you would if you had $1 million. To prove that I believe in you and your sermon, if you will come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you the $1 million. My name is Philip D. Armour." Young Gonzales went to Mr. Armour's office, and the $1 million was presented to him. With that money, he founded the Armour Institute of Technology, now known as Illinois Institute of Technology. The $1 million that launched the Armour Institute came as the result of an idea. Behind the idea was a desire that young Gonzales had been nursing in his mind for almost 2 years. Observe this important fact. He got the money within 36 hours after he reached a definite decision in his own mind to get it and decided upon a definite plan for getting it. There was nothing new or unique about young Gonzales vaguely thinking about $1 million and weakly hoping for it. Others have had similar thoughts. But there was something very unique and different about the decision he reached on that memorable Saturday, when he put vagueness into the background and definitely said, "I will get that money within a week." The principle through which Dr. Gonzales got his $1 million is still alive. It is available to you. This universal law is as workable today as it was when the young preacher made use of it so successfully. Editor's comments. The Armour Institute of Technology opened in 1893, offering courses in engineering, chemistry, architecture, and library science, and in 1940 became the Illinois Institute of Technology when the Armour Institute merged with the Lewis Institute, a Chicago college that had opened in 1895 and offered liberal arts as well as science and engineering courses. In 1949, the Institute of Design, founded in 1937, also merged with IIT, followed in 1969 by the Chicago-Kent College of Law and the Stewart School of Business, and in 1986 by the Midwest College of Engineering. Today there are several campuses in downtown Chicago. IIT has been called the alma mater of accomplishments. This is the end of the editor's comment. How to transmute ideas into cash. Asa Candler and Dr. Frank Gonzales had one characteristic in common. Both knew the astounding truth that ideas can be transmuted into cash through the power of definite purpose plus definite plans. If you are one of those who believe that hard work and honesty alone will bring riches, you can forget it. It is not true. Riches, when they come in huge quantities, are never the result of hard work alone. Riches come, if they come at all, in response to definite demands based upon the application of definite principles, and not by chance or luck. Generally speaking, an idea is a thought that prompts you to action because it appeals to your imagination. All master salespeople know that ideas can be sold where merchandise cannot. Ordinary salespeople do not know this. That is why they are ordinary. A publisher of low-priced books made a discovery that has been worth much to publishers. He learned that many people buy titles and not the contents of books. By merely changing the name of one book that was not moving, his sales of that book jumped upward more than 1 million copies. The inside of the book was not changed in any way. He merely ripped off the cover and put on a new cover with a title that had box office appeal. That as simple as it may seem, was an idea. It was imagination. Editor's comment. For those readers who think that replacing the cover of a book is just too simple, or that they couldn't do it anyway because they are not book publishers, the editors would point out that if you had had that simple idea before the publisher did, he probably would have been glad to sell you those failed books at pennies on the dollar. Then you could have been the one to change the cover, and suddenly you would have been the publisher of a bestseller. However, the idea of replacing the covers wouldn't have meant a thing if you didn't also have ideas about how to market and promote that flashy new cover. And that is Hill's point. Coca-Cola was a recipe, a creative idea. But it would have stayed just a recipe if Asa Candler hadn't also had other creative ideas to market it and the faith in himself to carry through on those ideas. Spence Silver was a chemist working for 3M when, by accident, he created a glue that wasn't very sticky. Needless to say, 3M was not much interested in glue that didn't stick, and Silver's invention was shelved as a failure. But Silver liked his glue, so for 5 years he kept demonstrating it to anyone who would listen. Nobody did, until Arthur Fry, who worked in the tape division at 3M, found that when he was at choir practice, he kept losing his place in the hymnal because the pieces of paper he used to mark his place slipped down or fell out of the book. A little of Silver's not very sticky glue on the slips of paper, and they stayed where he wanted them, then peeled off easily when he was done. That was the eureka moment. They had just invented the world's best bookmark, Post-its. But that's not the end of the story, or the end of the imaginative ideas that were needed to make Post-its happen. Fry would also need perseverance. First, he had to convince the engineers to solve production problems, and to do it, he knocked a hole in his basement wall so he could install a prototype of the production equipment. He stuck with it, and finally, 2 years later, 3M gave the project to their marketing department. The marketing experts put together ads and brochures selling this sticky notepad idea and rolled it out in a 4-city test. The results were a disaster. Nobody got it, so nobody bought it. Who would pay money for scratch paper? The Post-it project was about to be scrapped when Jeffrey Nicholson and Joseph Ramey added their imaginations. Like Silver and Fry, Nicholson and Ramey had faith in the idea because they saw how people in their office fell in love with these little sticky pieces of paper once they started working with them. So Nicholson and Ramey went to Richmond, Virginia, one of the 4 test cities that had failed, and they went up and down the business district, going into offices and giving pads of Post-its to receptionists, secretaries, and anyone else who would listen. Whereas 3M's conventional marketing machinery had failed, giving Post-its to the people who would actually use them did the trick. Once those Richmond office workers started to use Post-its, it didn't seem like a bad idea at all to pay for scratch paper. They got it, and they bought it. The Richmond test turned from failure to success, and soon Post-its were sticking to everything around the world. Here's another simple idea that imagination turned into success. The story began with a man whose problem was just the opposite of Spence Silver's. This man had something that stuck too well. George de Mestral was a Swiss mountaineer who went hunting one day with his dog. But when they got home, they were both covered with burrs. The burrs were so difficult to remove that de Mestral put them under a magnifying glass to learn why. He saw that they were covered with tiny hooks which attached themselves to fur and fabric. That was when the flash hit. If burrs stuck where you didn't want them, why couldn't you put tiny hooks on things so they would stick where you did want them? Like everyone else mentioned in this book, de Mestral had an imaginative idea, but that was just the beginning. He also had the faith in himself to keep going when people laughed at his idea, which many did, until he eventually found a French textile plant that would help him do what he wanted. However, even when they finally worked out a way to use cotton fabric to make what they called locking tape, they couldn't afford to mass-produce it. And that's when de Mestral accidentally discovered that when you sew nylon under infrared light, it naturally made little hooks. Now they could manufacture it economically. All they needed was a name. One side was fuzzy like velvet, and the other side was crochet, the French word for hook. take half Vel and half Crow, combine it with imagination. The result is Velcro, and a Swiss mountaineer becomes a business tycoon. The Sony Corporation once tried to make a very small stereo tape recorder that would work with standard-size cassettes, but they couldn't do it. They could make a small playback machine, but at the time the electronics needed to also make it a recording machine just couldn't be made small enough. They concluded that the design was a failure. Then one day Sony's honorary chairman, Masaru Ibuka, walked into the laboratory and saw that a few of the engineers were using the prototypes of the failed tape recorder to listen to music tapes. They didn't seem to care that it couldn't record. They just liked to be able to walk around listening to their favorite music. Then came the imaginative idea that made all the difference. Ibuka remembered that another division was working on lightweight headphones. That was the Flash. Ibuka's imagination made the connection that the rest of the engineers had not. In Ibuka's view, they hadn't made a failed recorder. They had created a successful private stereo listener. They added the headphones, named it the Walkman, and it revolutionized both the music business and the electronics industry. Clarence Saunders was a grocery clerk in a small southern retail store. One day he was standing with a tray in his hands waiting his turn in a cafeteria. He had never earned more than $20 a week before then, and no one had ever noticed anything about him that indicated unusual ability, but something took place in his mind as he stood in the line of waiting people that put his imagination to work. That was when he came up with the idea that this same self-serve concept would also work at the grocery store. Clarence Saunders took the idea to his boss. Naturally, his boss told him he was crazy. So Clarence Saunders quit his job, went out and did what he needed to do to raise the money, and opened the first self-serve grocery store. He called it Piggly Wiggly, and Clarence Saunders, the $20-a-week grocery clerk, rapidly became the multi-million-dollar chain store grocery man of America. Sylvan Goldman was the owner of a number of Piggly Wiggly stores in Oklahoma, and like any good businessman, he spent a lot of time watching his customers go up and down the aisles, putting their choices into their baskets or net shopping bags. One night, while trying to figure out how to get his customers to buy more at one time, he found himself staring at a basket sitting on the seat of a wooden folding chair. Eureka! He called in his mechanic, Fred Young. They put some wheels on the bottom of the legs, added another basket below the seat, and the shopping cart was born. As this edition is being readied for publication, there are about 35 million shopping carts in America, and approximately 1.25 million new carts are sold each year. Thomas Stemberg, whom we also mentioned earlier, was another supermarket executive who watched his customers as they shopped. By this time, shopping carts were well established in supermarkets, and it was because his customers were pushing shopping carts up and down the aisles that he got his flash of inspiration. He was so sure of his idea that he convinced another supermarket executive, Leo Kahn, to join him. Together, they took the supermarket concept and applied it to selling office supplies. And in 1986, they opened their first store in Brighton, Massachusetts. They called it Staples. In 1989, they took the company public, and 10 years later there were more than 1,000 Staples stores with revenues exceeding $7 billion. We'll end this commentary with another set of connected stories, which make the point that sometimes the most imaginative part of marketing is in the timing. If you were to go shopping in the late 1800s, it usually meant bartering with a merchant who would then have to get the goods from storage shelves kept behind the counter. In the 1870s, fixed pricing was just starting to be used by storekeepers. Merchants were trying the idea by setting out a table of merchandise that was all priced the same, usually 5 cents. Frank Winfield Woolworth was a clerk in a general store, and he convinced the store owner to let him try the 5-cent table idea. Although it worked, the owner wasn't impressed. So Woolworth borrowed $350 from his boss, and in 1879 opened his first 5-cent store in Utica, New York. It was an entire store full of goods where everything cost a nickel. A year later, he had 4 stores, and the 4th one, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was the first that he named F.W. Woolworth's 5 and 10 cent store. 20 years later, he had 238 stores. By the time of his death in 1919, there were over 1,000 F.W. Woolworth locations. He had established the first nationwide chain of general merchandise stores, and he had built the tallest building in New York City as his headquarters. The Woolworth Company stayed true to the original idea and didn't carry any merchandise that cost more than a dime until 1932, when the top price was raised to 20 cents. But as times changed, the fixed price was dropped, the merchandise became more varied, and the company kept growing until it had over 8,000 stores worldwide, selling everything from notions to appliances and furniture. Then in the 1960s and 1970s, something started to happen. The mood of America was changing, but the Woolworth stores weren't. And that was when Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas, in 1962. Walton got into the retail business after the Second World War, when his father-in-law loaned him the money to buy a franchise Butler Brothers store in Bentonville, Arkansas. By 1962, Sam and his brother Bud owned 16 variety stores in Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. It was in these stores that Sam Walton first started adding the magic ingredient of imagination. In addition to his flair for promotion, Sam tried new approaches to the way household goods and general merchandise could be sold at retail. He insisted on clean, well-lighted interiors, and he introduced the concept of self-service, with aisles wide enough for shopping carts and checkout counters at the front of the store. He also started buying direct from manufacturers, and he created profit-sharing plans that kept his family of employees loyal, hard-working, and neighborly. In 1962, he incorporated those and other imaginative ideas when he opened his first store that he called Walmart. The basic magic was that he sold brand-name merchandise at discount prices, but there was also magic in the way he kept a friendly hometown feel to his store, even though it was what is now called a big box store. Sam Walton's Walmart store was a success, so he just kept building and opening more of them, first in small towns and rural areas, then in larger towns, then big cities, and it wasn't long before he had a national chain. By 1992, when Sam Walton died, there were more than 1,700 Walmart stores. It was the biggest retailer in the country, it employed more than 600,000 people, and Sam Walton was the richest man in America. In 2003, the stores numbered more than 3,200 in the U.S. and more than 1,100 in foreign countries. The company employed more than 1,300,000 people worldwide and served more than 1 million customers a week. Along the way, Woolworths and other older retailers such as Kresge's tried to get on the bandwagon with their Woolco and Kmart stores, but they couldn't seem to get it right. They had given up their old 5 and dime identity to become higher-priced general retailers. And when Walmart came along and redefined that part of the market, the others seemed to have run out of the kind of imagination they'd had in the beginning. Now, here's the twist to the story. David Gold was running a liquor store that he had inherited from his father. He noticed that whenever he put out a display of goods priced at 98 cents or $1, the goods would sell okay, but if his sign said 99 cents, the goods sold out in no time. He decided that he would open a store called the 99-cent only store, where everything would be priced at 99 cents. Sound familiar? Frank Woolworth's imaginative idea from 1879, which had been dropped at his namesake chain by the 1940s and 1950s, had just gotten a fresh shot of imagination from David Gold in 1982. As usual, friends and family told him he was crazy, but David Gold went out to find suppliers who would sell him discontinued merchandise or overproduced products at a price low enough that he could offer them to the public at 99 cents. He found them. And they even had brand-name products of everything from hardware to pantyhose, cleaning products, motor oil, kitchenware, cosmetics, electronics, toys, canned goods, frozen foods, cookies, fresh fruit, even gourmet foods. More than 5,000 items that he could sell for 99 cents and still make a profit. David Gold opened his first well-lighted, brightly colored green and fuchsia wide-aisle store in Inglewood, California in 1982. By 2003, he had 142 stores in California, Nevada, and Arizona, and he was listed on the Forbes 400 as having earned a personal fortune estimated at more than $650 million. As Napoleon Hill wrote elsewhere about the creation of Piggly Wiggly, "Where in this story do you see the slightest indication of something that you could not duplicate? The plan, which made millions of dollars for its originator, was a very simple idea that anyone could have adopted, yet considerable imagination was required to put the idea to work in a practical sort of way. The more simple and easily adapted an idea is, the greater is its value, as no one is looking for ideas that are involved with great detail or are in any way complicated." This is the end of the editor's comments. There is no standard price on ideas. The creator of ideas sets his or her own price, and if they are smart, they get it. The story of practically every great fortune starts with the day when a creator of ideas and a seller of ideas got together and worked in harmony. Carnegie surrounded himself with men who could do what he could not do, men who created ideas and men who put ideas into operation, and that was what made him and the others fabulously rich. Millions of people go through life hoping for favorable breaks. Perhaps a favorable break can get you an opportunity, but the safest plan is not to depend upon luck. It was a favorable break that gave me the biggest opportunity of my life, but more than 20 years of determined effort had to be devoted to that opportunity before it became an asset. The break consisted of my good fortune in meeting and gaining the cooperation of Andrew Carnegie. On that occasion, Carnegie planted in my mind the idea of organizing the principles of achievement into a philosophy of success. Millions of people have profited by the discoveries made in the years of research, and fortunes have been accumulated through the application of the philosophy. The beginning was simple. It was an idea that anyone might have developed. The favorable break came through Carnegie. But what about the determination, definiteness of purpose, and the desire to attain the goal, and the persistent effort of all those years of research? It was no ordinary desire that survived disappointment, discouragement, temporary defeat, criticism, and the constant reminding that I was wasting my time. It was a burning desire, an obsession. When the idea was first planted in my mind by Mr. Carnegie, it was coaxed, nursed, and enticed to remain alive. Gradually, the idea became a giant under its own power, and it coaxed, nursed, and drove me. Ideas are like that. First you give life and action and guidance to ideas. Then they take on a power of their own and sweep aside all opposition. Ideas are intangible forces, but they have more power than the physical brains that give birth to them. They have the power to live on after the brain that creates them has returned to dust. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first, show it. Chapter 8. Organized Planning. The crystallization of desire into action. The sixth step toward riches. You have learned that everything we create or acquire begins in the form of desire. Desire is taken on the first lap of its journey from the abstract to the concrete in the workshop of the imagination, where plans for its transition are created and organized. In Chapter 3, Desire, you were instructed to take 6 practical steps to begin translating your desire for money into its monetary equivalent. One of the steps you must take is the formation of a definite, practical plan or plans through which this transformation may be made. Following are the basic instructions for making practical plans. Ally yourself with a group of as many people as you may need for the creation and carrying out of your plan or plans for the accumulation of money, making use of the MasterMind principle. Compliance with this instruction is absolutely essential. Do not neglect it. Editor's comment. The MasterMind Alliance is built of 2 or more minds working actively together in perfect harmony toward a common goal. This concept was introduced in Chapter 6, Specialized Knowledge, and is described in more detail in Chapter 11, The Power of the Mastermind. This is the end of the editor's comment. Before forming your MasterMind alliance, decide what advantages and benefits you may offer the individual members of your group in return for their cooperation. No one will work indefinitely without some form of compensation. No intelligent person should request or expect another to work without adequate compensation, although this may not always be in the form of money. Arrange to meet with the members of your MasterMind group at least twice a week, and more often if possible, until you have jointly perfected the necessary plan or plans for the accumulation of money. Maintain perfect harmony between yourself and every member of your MasterMind group. If you fail to carry out this instruction to the letter, you may expect to meet with failure. The MasterMind principle cannot work where perfect harmony does not prevail. Keep in mind these facts. You are engaged in an undertaking of major importance to you. To be sure of success, you must have plans that are faultless. You must have the advantage of the experience, education, native ability, and imagination of other minds. This is the way it has been done by every person who has accumulated a great fortune. No individual has sufficient experience, education, natural ability, and knowledge to ensure the accumulation of a great fortune without the cooperation of other people. Every plan you adopt for making money should be the joint creation of yourself and every other member of your MasterMind group. You may originate your own plans, either in whole or in part, but see that those plans are checked and approved by the members of your MasterMind alliance. If your first plan fails, try another. If the first plan that you adopt does not work successfully, replace it with a new plan. If this new plan fails to work, replace it with still another, and so on, until you find a plan that does work. Right here is the point at which the majority of people meet with failure, because of their lack of persistence in creating new plans to take the place of those that fail. The most intelligent person living cannot succeed in accumulating money, or in any other undertaking, without plans that are practical and workable. Just keep this fact in mind, and remember when your plans fail that temporary defeat is not permanent failure. It may only mean that your plans have not been sound. Build other plans. Start all over again. Temporary defeat should mean only one thing: the certain knowledge that there is something wrong with your plan. Millions of people go through life in misery and poverty because they lack a sound plan through which to accumulate a fortune. Your achievement can only be as good as the plans you make. You are never whipped until you quit in your own mind. James J. Hill, who was the greatest railroad builder of them all, met with temporary defeat when he first tried to raise the capital needed to build the Great Northern Railroad from the east to the west. But he turned defeat into victory through new plans. Henry Ford met with temporary defeat not only at the beginning of his automobile career, but even after he had gone a long way toward the top. But he, too, created new plans and went marching on to financial victory. We see people who have accumulated great fortunes, but we often recognize only their triumph, and we overlook the temporary defeats that they had to surmount before arriving. No follower of this philosophy can reasonably expect to accumulate a fortune without experiencing temporary defeat. When defeat comes, accept it as a signal that your plans are not sound. Rebuild those plans and set sail once more toward your goal. If you give up before your goal has been reached, you're a quitter. A quitter never wins, and a winner never quits. Write this sentence on a piece of paper in letters an inch high and place it where you will see it every night before you go to sleep and every morning before you go to work. When you begin to select members for your MasterMind group, choose those who do not take defeat seriously. Some people foolishly believe that only money can make money. This is not true. Desire, transmuted into its monetary equivalent through the principles in this book, is the way money is made. Money, of itself, is nothing but inert matter. It cannot move, think, or talk, but it can hear when someone who desires it calls it to come. Intelligent planning is essential for success in any undertaking designed to accumulate riches. Following are detailed instructions to those who must begin the accumulation of riches by selling personal services. It should encourage you to know that practically all the great fortunes began either from selling personal services or from the sale of ideas. When you think about it, what else except ideas and personal services can you give in return for riches if you don't have products or property? Leaders and followers. Broadly speaking, there are two types of people in the world. One type is known as leaders, and the other as followers. Decide at the outset whether you intend to become a leader in your chosen calling or remain a follower. The difference in compensation is vast. The follower cannot expect to make as much as a leader, although some followers make the mistake of thinking they should. It is no disgrace to be a follower. On the other hand, it is no credit to remain a follower. Most great leaders began as followers. They became great leaders because they were intelligent followers. With few exceptions, the person who cannot follow a leader intelligently cannot become an efficient leader. The person who can follow a leader most efficiently is usually the person who develops into leadership most rapidly. An intelligent follower has many advantages, including the opportunity to acquire knowledge from the leader. The major attributes of leadership. The following are important factors of leadership. 1. Unwavering courage based upon knowledge of yourself and your occupation. No follower wishes to be dominated by a leader who lacks self-confidence and courage. Certainly no intelligent follower will be dominated by such a leader for very long. 2. Self-control. The person who cannot control himself can never control others. Self-control sets a strong example for your followers, which the more intelligent followers will emulate. 3. A keen sense of justice. Without a sense of fairness and justice, no leader can command and retain the respect of their followers. 4. Definiteness of decision. Those who waver in decisions show that they are not sure of themselves and therefore cannot lead others successfully. 5. Definiteness of plans. Successful leaders must plan their work and work their plans. Leaders who move by guesswork, without practical definite plans, are like a ship without a rudder. Sooner or later, they will land on the rocks. 6. The habit of doing more than paid for. One of the penalties of leadership is the necessity of the leaders to willingly do more than they require of their followers. 7. A pleasing personality. Leadership calls for respect. Followers will not respect a leader who does not grade high on all of the factors of a pleasing personality. 8. Sympathy and understanding. Successful leaders must be in sympathy with their followers. Moreover, they must understand them and their problems. 9. Mastery of detail. Successful leadership calls for mastery of the details of the leader's position. 10. Willingness to assume full responsibility. Successful leaders must be willing to assume responsibility for the mistakes and the shortcomings of their followers. If a leader tries to shift this responsibility, that leader will not remain the leader. If one of your followers makes a mistake or is incompetent, you must consider that it is you who failed. 11. Cooperation. The successful leader must understand and apply the principle of cooperative effort and be able to induce followers to do the same. Leadership calls for power, and power calls for cooperation. There are two forms of leadership. The first, and by far the most effective, is leadership by consent of and with the sympathy of the followers. The second is leadership by force, without the consent and sympathy of the followers. History is filled with evidences that leadership by force cannot endure. The downfall and disappearance of dictators and kings is significant. It means that people will not follow forced leadership indefinitely. Napoleon, Mussolini, Hitler were examples of leadership by force. Their leadership passed. Editor's comment. The following may also be added to the list: Idi Amin, Francisco Franco, Saddam Hussein, Ferdinand Marcos, Slobodan Milosevic, Juan Perón, General Augusto Pinochet, Pol Pot, General Suharto, the Taliban leaders in Afghanistan, Marshal Josip Broz Tito, Joseph Stalin, and subsequent leaders of the Soviet Union, East Germany, and the other countries in the Communist bloc. This is the end of the editor's comment. Those that remain see their power eroding and slipping away. Leadership by consent of the followers is the only leadership that can endure. People may follow forced leadership temporarily, but they will not do so willingly. Successful leaders will embrace the 11 factors of leadership described in this chapter, as well as some other factors. Those who make these attributes the basis of their leadership will find abundant opportunity to lead in any walk of life. The 10 major causes of failure in leadership. The following are the major faults of leaders who fail. It is just as essential for you to know what not to do as it is to know what to do. 1. Inability to organize details. Efficient leadership calls for the ability to organize and master details. No genuine leader is ever too busy to do anything that may be required in the capacity as leader. Whether a leader or follower, when you admit that you are too busy to change your plans or to give attention to any emergency, you are admitting your inefficiency. The successful leader must be the master of all details connected with the position. That means, of course, that you must acquire the habit of relegating details to capable lieutenants. 2. Unwillingness to render humble service. Truly great leaders are willing, when occasion demands, to perform any sort of labor that they would ask another to perform. The greatest among ye shall be the servant of all is a truth that all able leaders observe and respect. 3. Expectation of pay for what they know, instead of what they do with what they know. The world does not pay you for what you know. It pays you for what you do, or what you induce others to do. 4. Fear of competition from followers. Leaders who fear that one of their followers may take their position are practically sure to realize that fear sooner or later. Able leaders train understudies to whom they may delegate any of the details of their position. Only in this way can leaders multiply themselves and be at many places and give attention to many things at one time. It is an eternal truth that leaders receive more pay for their ability to get others to perform than they could possibly earn by their own efforts. An efficient leader may, through knowledge of the job and a magnetic personality, greatly increase the efficiency of others and get them to render more service and better service than they could render without the leader's guidance. 5. Lack of imagination. Without imagination, the leader is incapable of meeting emergencies for the work of their followers are sure to be met by resentment. The really great leader claims none of the honors. Great leaders are content to see the honors, when there are any, go to their followers, because the great leaders know that most people will work harder for commendation and recognition than they will for money alone. 7. Intemperance. Followers do not respect an intemperate leader. Moreover, intemperance in any form destroys the endurance and the vitality of those who indulge in it. 8. Disloyalty. Perhaps this should have come at the head of the list. Leaders who are not loyal to their duty, and to those both above and below them, cannot maintain their leadership for long. Disloyalty marks you as being less than the dust of the earth, and it will bring the contempt it deserves. Lack of loyalty is one of the major causes of failure in every walk of life. 9. Emphasis of the authority of leadership. The efficient leader leads by encouraging, and not by trying to instill fear in the hearts of those who follow. Leaders who try to impress their followers with their authority come within the category of leadership through force. If you are a real leader, you will have no need to advertise that fact. It is apparent in your conduct, by your sympathy, understanding, fairness, and a demonstration that you know your job. 10. Emphasis of title. Competent leaders require no title to give them the respect of their followers. Leaders who make too much of their titles generally have little else to emphasize. The doors to the office of the real leader are open to all and free from formality or ostentation. These are among the most common causes of failure in leadership. Any one of these faults is sufficient to cause failure. Study the list carefully if you aspire to leadership, and make sure that you are free of these faults. Editor's comment. Warren Bennis, a professor who teaches management and organization, said, "A manager is someone who does things right. A leader is someone who does the right thing." Years of experience, during which thousands of men and women were helped to market their services effectively. Editor's comment. The Internet, email, and faxed resumes have radically changed the way employers search for new employees, and the way that most people apply for jobs. However, Think and Grow Rich was never intended for most people. It was written for those who want to stand out. If you are such a person, the editors of this revised and updated edition strongly advise that you give serious thought to each of the following suggestions about how to apply for a position and how to prepare a resume. If you are tempted to think the suggestions are too obvious, simplistic, or out of date, we assure you they are not. In those instances where it is appropriate to update the material, we have added commentary. This is the end of the editor's comment. 1. Employment agencies. Care must be taken to select only reputable companies that can show adequate records of achievement of satisfactory results. Editor's comment. As anyone in the job market knows, today employment agencies range from companies that supply temporary office help to headhunters who connect high-level executives with companies seeking experienced management talent. If you are seeking a mid to upper-level position, the old adage that you get what you pay for is particularly true. This is the end of the editor's comment. 2. Advertising in newspapers, trade journals, magazines. Classified advertising may produce satisfactory results for those applying for entry-level, clerical, or salaried positions. For those seeking executive positions, a well-written and well-designed display ad, though more expensive, may be more desirable. The copy should be prepared by an expert who understands how to inject sufficient selling qualities to produce replies. Editor's comment. For individuals, the display ad approach is not very common in the contemporary job market. But for that reason, if you are sure of the position you want, a well-written and well-designed ad selling yourself and placed in the right trade paper or industry journal might be just the thing to get the attention you want. However, if you attempt this approach, be prepared that it will be an expensive experiment. In effect, you will have gone into the advertising business, and it is a rule of thumb in advertising that a single ad rarely sells anything. It usually requires multiple exposures before the buyer, the potential employer, is motivated to buy, hire, a product, you. This is the end of the editor's comment. 3. Personal letters of application. These should be directed to particular firms or individuals that could need the kind of service or experience you have to offer. Letters should be neatly typed always and signed by hand. You should include a complete resume or outline of your qualifications. Both the letter of application and the resume should be prepared by an expert. Editor's comment. In the contemporary job market, sending a letter of application when no job has been advertised can in fact be a very successful approach. But this is only for those who truly know what they want and will take the time to prepare a convincing presentation. Managers in a position to hire always have an eye out for good prospective employees. If they receive a well-constructed and intriguing presentation that clearly states you are interested in a position whenever one is available, it will not be thrown away. And the first thing good managers do when a position comes open is go to their files. When that happens, if your presentation made a good and convincing impression, it will be there. The only question is, are you willing to make yourself available when they are ready for you? If you are just blanketing everyone with a stock letter in hopes of getting a job, it very likely won't work. This approach is not for someone looking for a job. This approach is only for those who really want a specific career. This is the end of the editor's comment. 4. Application in person. In some instances, it may be more effective if the applicant personally offers his or her services to prospective employers, in which event a complete written statement of qualifications for the position should be presented, as prospective employers will often wish to discuss your record with associates. Editor's comment. Asking for an interview when no job has been advertised is an even stronger statement that you know what you want and you are serious about working in a particular industry. If you pursue this approach, keep in mind that you are asking someone to give you their time. Some managers will not be receptive because it does not fit into their company's business practice, and some managers will just find it an annoyance. This approach will work for you only if you are confident that you can make an outstanding impression in person. If you make a strong, positive impression, it will be remembered when an opening is available. This is the end of the editor's comment. 5. Application through personal acquaintances. When possible, the applicant should approach prospective employers through some mutual acquaintance. This method is particularly advantageous in the case of those who seek executive connections and do not wish to appear to be peddling themselves. Information to be supplied in a written resume. A good resume should be prepared as carefully as a lawyer would prepare the brief for a case to be tried in court. Unless the applicant is experienced in the preparation of such briefs, an expert should be consulted for this purpose. When successful businesses want to advertise, they hire specialists who understand the psychology of advertising to sell their products. If you are selling your personal services, you should do the same. Editor's comment. The job market in America has never been as bad as it was when Napoleon Hill wrote the preceding paragraph. Because of the Great Depression, many adults had never had any kind of steady job, let alone sought a career position, and there were few places to learn how to do it. Since that time, many excellent books have been published on the subject, and companies that offer professional help in preparing resumes have become very common. However, neither books nor copywriters are magic. It all begins with what you have to offer. The editors of this edition suggest that you start to assemble your presentation using the guidelines that appear below. Once you have a first draft, you should review at least one of the books on the subject to see what suggestions are offered that might help you sell yourself better than you have already done. Then, depending how satisfied you are, you might also want to seek advice from a professional who specializes in such presentations. We offer 2 notes of caution. First, make sure that your presentation does not look like something turned out by a resume mill. Having received many resumes over the years, the editors warn you that some professionals use the same stock phrases, buzzwords, and formats for every client, and this can be a dead giveaway that someone else prepared your resume, or that you have simply copied from a book. Your intention should be to make yours stand out. The second word of caution is, don't go overboard in trying to stand out. There is a balance between catching an employer's attention and looking like you are trying too hard. For instance, if you are a New York marketing executive applying to a Los Angeles company, sending your application with a bag of fresh bagels by next morning FedEx would probably make a good impression, whereas sending a dartboard with your picture in the center might be viewed as just a little too cute and a little too much. Clever is good, but professional is a must. Never be so clever that you don't look professional. Following are a set of guidelines for preparing your resume. Because part of your search for a position will involve responding to ads for job openings, and because it has become common to respond by faxing applications and resumes, Napoleon Hill's guidelines should be used to prepare two separate presentations. As Hill suggests below, you should prepare an elaborate presentation to be used when mailed or presented in person. But you should also prepare a second, shorter version that is designed specifically to be faxed. Take care to make your fax version complete and interesting, but it should be no more than 3 pages. The following information should appear in your presentation. 1. Education. State briefly but definitely what schooling you've had and in what subjects you specialized in school, giving the reasons for that specialization. Editor's comments. Never exaggerate. This is very serious advice, and it applies not only to education, but also the next 2 categories, experience and references. Smart employers will check in all 3 areas. Labor laws have become so demanding that employers filling responsible positions are very cautious about whom they hire in the first place. There are rules about such things as the difference between salaried and hourly employment, sexual harassment, what constitutes grounds for dismissal, what questions can and cannot be asked in job interviews, and a host of other things that leave the employer open to potential lawsuits. Consequently, smart employers, the kind you want to work for, will check your education, experience, and references. Also, bear in mind, you are providing information that will follow you for the rest of your career. If you keep up with the news, you know that in recent times even executives headed for the top have been dismissed. Military men have resigned in disgrace. Politicians have been removed from office, and professors have been forced to resign, all because someone looked into their background and found that they had exaggerated their qualifications. This is the end of the editor's comments. 2. Experience. If you have had experience in connection with positions similar to the one you seek, describe it fully. Give the names and addresses of former employers. Be sure to clearly point out any special experience you may have had that would equip you to fill the position you seek. 3. References. Practically every business firm wants to know as much as possible about the background of prospective employees who seek positions of responsibility. Attach copies of letters from former employers, from teachers under whom you studied, and from prominent people whose judgment may be relied upon. 4. Photograph of yourself. Include a recent professional photograph of yourself as a part of your presentation. Editor's comment. In the contemporary job market, this is not a common practice at all. However, from personal experience, the editors of this edition know it can be advantageous. We have received only one such job application, but unquestionably it was the photograph that prompted us to ask the applicant to come in for an interview. If you are confident that your appearance makes a good, professional impression, you may want to consider this unusual approach. There is the danger that you may be seen as vain or self-centered, but it could also be the thing that gives you an edge. This is the end of the editor's comment. 5. Apply for a specific position. Never apply for just a job. That indicates you lack specialized qualifications. 6. State your qualifications for the particular position for which you apply. Give full details why you believe you are qualified for the particular position you seek. This is the most important detail of your application. It will determine, more than anything else, what consideration you receive. 7. Offer to go to work on probation. This may appear to be a radical suggestion, but experience has proved that it seldom fails to win at least a trial. If you are sure of your qualifications, A trial is all you need. Incidentally, such an offer indicates that you have confidence in your ability to fill the position you seek. It is most convincing. Make it clear that your offer is based on your confidence in your ability to fill the position, your confidence in your prospective employer's decision to employ you after the trial period, and your determination to have the position. Editor's comments. As you will learn in Chapter 10, when you read the story of Napoleon Hill's application to Rufus Ayers, Hill gives this advice based on his personal experience. Unfortunately, this is one of those instances where times may have changed so much that the approach is rarely applicable. In today's environment, modern labor laws and business practice may prevent an employer from taking you up on your offer. However, today many companies do have internship programs that allow an employer to test drive employees to see how well they might fit in. This is the end of the editor's comment. 8. Knowledge of your prospective employer's business. Before applying for a position, do sufficient research to familiarize yourself thoroughly with that business and indicate the knowledge you have acquired in this field. This will be impressive because it indicates that you have imagination and a real interest in the position you seek. Editor's comment. When you do this, and you certainly should, bear in mind that you will be talking with people who really know the business. Even by researching extensively, at best you will only know about their business. If you try to appear too knowledgeable or familiar, it may backfire and reveal that you have only a superficial view of the business. Unless you are already working in a particular industry and have insights based on experience, do not be presumptuous. Use your knowledge to indicate that you have taken the time to educate yourself and that you really are interested, but don't try to tell a prospective employer how you would run the business. This is the end of the editor's comment. Remember that it is not the lawyer who knows the most law, but the one who best prepares his case who wins. If your case is properly prepared and presented, your victory will have been more than half won at the outset. Do not be afraid of making your presentation too long. Employers are just as much interested in purchasing the services of well-qualified applicants as you are in securing employment. In fact, the success of most successful employers is due to their ability to select well-qualified lieutenants. They want all the information available. Editor's comment. As noted above, when faxing a resume, it should be no more than 3 pages and should state that you will be pleased to provide a more detailed resume if required. This is the end of the editor's comment. Remember another thing. Neatness in the preparation of your resume and application will indicate that you are a painstaking person. Successful salespeople groom themselves with care. They understand that first impressions are lasting. Your presentation is your sales rep. Give it a good suit of clothes so it will stand out in bold contrast to anything else your prospective employer ever saw. If the position you seek is worth having, it is worth going after with care. More important, if you sell yourself in a manner that shows off your individuality, you probably will receive more money from the very start than you would if you applied for employment in the usual conventional way. When your resume package has been completed, you should prepare individual and personalized copies for each company or person to whom it will be presented. This personal touch is sure to command attention. Have it neatly typed, proofread, printed, and properly bound on the finest paper you can obtain. Your photograph should be mounted and included on one of the pages. Prepare a separate binding with the proper company name inserted if it is to be shown to more than one company. If you seek employment through an employment agency, have the agent use copies of your presentation in marketing your services. This will help to gain preference for you, both with the agent and the prospective employers. I've helped to prepare presentations for clients that were so striking and out of the ordinary that they resulted in the employment of the applicant without a personal interview. If you want similar results, follow the instructions to the letter, improving upon them however your imagination suggests. Editor's comments. Today, every office supply store offers a wide variety of paper stock, folders, binders, and presentation materials that can be put together in a way that is both unique and professional looking. With all of those possibilities available, if you simply present standard sheets of paper stapled in the corner, the response will very likely be standard too. If you apply a little creativity, you should have no trouble preparing a presentation that is tailored to the company to which you are applying, appropriate for the position you seek, and reflective of your personality and style. This is the end of the editor's comments. How to get the exact position you desire. Everyone enjoys doing the kind of work for which he or she is best suited. An artist loves to work with paints, a craftsman with his or her hands, a writer loves to write. Those with less definite talents have their preferences for certain fields of business and industry. If America does anything well, it offers a full range of occupations. 1. Decide exactly what kind of a job you want. If the job doesn't already exist, perhaps you can create it. 2. Choose the company or individual for whom you wish to work. 3. Study your prospective employer as to policies, personnel, and chances for advancement. 4. By analysis of yourself, your talents, and your capabilities, figure what you can offer. Plan specific ways and means of giving advantages, services, developments, or ideas that you believe you can successfully deliver. 5. Forget about a job. Forget whether or not there is an opening. Forget the usual routine of, have you got a job for me? Concentrate on what you can give. 6. Once you have your plan in mind, put it on paper in neat form and in full detail. 7. Present it to the proper person with authority, and the rest will come automatically. Every company is looking for people who can give something of value, whether it is ideas, services, or connections. Every company has room for the person who has a definite plan of action that is to the advantage of that company. This procedure may take a few days or weeks of extra time, but the difference in income, in advancement, and in gaining recognition will save years of hard work at small pay. It has many advantages, the main one being that it will often save you from 1 to 5 years of your time in reaching a chosen goal. Every person who starts, or gets in halfway up the ladder, does so by deliberate and careful planning. The new way of marketing services. Men and women who market their services must recognize the change that has taken place in connection with the relationship between employer and employee. The future relationship should be more in the nature of a partnership, consisting of the employer, the employee, and the public they serve. In the past, employers and employees have bartered among themselves, not considering that in reality they were bargaining at the expense of the third party, the public they served. Both the employer and the employee should consider themselves as fellow employees whose business it will be to serve the public efficiently. Editor's comment. In the preceding paragraph, Napoleon Hill once again demonstrates his foresight into the future direction of American business. As you will recognize in the following section, the point he makes by citing the coal and gas companies would at a later time be equally applicable to the telephone monopolies, and later still to computer software and internet companies, and to cable television suppliers when competitors started to offer satellite TV. This snapshot of how and why business has changed should provide you with a blueprint for the attitude you must adopt and the way you must conduct yourself if you are going to attain the success you're seeking. This is the end of the editor's comment. During the Depression, I spent several months in the anthracite coal region of Pennsylvania, studying conditions that all but destroyed the coal industry. The coal operators and the unions drove hard bargains in negotiating their labor contracts. The cost of the bargaining was passed on to the customer by adding to the price of the coal. However, in the end, they discovered their actions had worked against them. What their delays and high prices had actually accomplished was to open the market to their competitors. Inadvertently, they had built up a wonderful business for the manufacturers of oil-burning stoves and furnaces, as well as for the producers of oil. A similar experience happened to the gas companies. We can all remember the time when the gas meter reader pounded on the door hard enough to break the panels. When the door was opened, he pushed his way in uninvited with a scowl on his face that plainly said, "What the hell did you keep me waiting for?" All that has undergone a change. The meter man now conducts himself as a gentleman who is delighted to be at your service, sir. Before the gas companies learned that their scowling meter men were offending customers, their competitors, the polite salesmen of oil burners, came along and did a land office business. These illustrations are mentioned here to show that we are where we are and what we are because of our own conduct. If there is a principle of cause and effect that controls business, finance, and transportation, this same principle controls individuals and determines their economic status. Courtesy and service are the watchwords of merchandising today, and they apply to the person who is marketing personal services even more directly than to the employer. In the final analysis, you are employed by the customer. If you fail to serve well, both you and your employer will pay for it by the loss of the privilege of serving. What is your QQS rating? In the preceding, the causes of success in marketing services effectively and permanently have been clearly described. Unless those causes are studied, analyzed, understood, and applied, no one can market services effectively and permanently. Every man or woman must be their own sales force of their personal services. The quality and the quantity of service rendered, and the spirit in which it is rendered, determine the price and the duration of employment. To market your personal services effectively, which means a permanent market at a satisfactory price under pleasant conditions, you must adopt and follow the QQS formula. QQS means that quality plus quantity plus the proper spirit of cooperation equals perfect salesmanship of service. Remember the QQS formula, but do more. Apply it as a habit. Analyze the formula to make sure you understand exactly what it means. Quality of service means the performance of every detail in connection with your position in the most efficient manner possible, with the object of greater efficiency always in mind. Quantity of service means the habit of rendering all the service of which you are capable at all times, with the purpose of increasing the amount of service rendered as you develop greater skill through practice and experience. Emphasis is again placed on the word habit. Spirit of service means the habit of agreeable, harmonious conduct, which will induce cooperation from associates and fellow employees. Adequate quality and adequate quantity of service is not sufficient to maintain a permanent market for your services. The spirit in which you deliver service is a strong determining factor in connection with both the price you receive and the duration of your employment. Andrew Carnegie stressed this point in his description of the factors that lead to success in the marketing of personal services. He emphasized again and again the necessity for harmonious conduct. He stressed the fact that he would not retain any man, no matter how great a quantity or how efficient the quality of his work, unless he worked in a spirit of harmony. Mr. Carnegie insisted upon his people working with each other in an agreeable manner. To prove that he placed a high value on this quality, he helped many who met his standards to become very wealthy. Those who did not conform had to make room for others who did. The importance of a pleasing personality has been stressed because it is so important in rendering service in the proper spirit. If you have a personality that pleases, and you render service in a spirit of harmony, these assets often make up for what you may lack in both the quality and the quantity of service you render. Nothing, however, can be successfully substituted for pleasing conduct. The capital value of your services. The person whose income is derived entirely from the sale of personal services is a merchant, just like the person who sells hard goods, and such a person is subject to exactly the same rules of conduct as the merchant who sells merchandise. I emphasize this because many people who live by the sale of personal services make the mistake of considering themselves free from the rules of conduct and the responsibilities attached to those who are engaged in marketing commodities. The day of the go-getter has been supplanted by the go-giver. The actual capitalized value of your brain power may be determined by the amount of income you can produce by marketing your services. A fair estimate of the capital value of your brain power may be made by using the following assumptions. Money, the amount of capital, can be borrowed from a bank at a certain rate of interest. Money is worth no more than brains, and it is often worth much less. Therefore, if your brain power is as valuable as money, in effect, you should be lending your brain power, your amount of capital, at least at the same rate that banks charge to lend money. This means that what you earn in a year, your income, is comparable to what a bank earns from a loan in a year, the interest they charge. You can then calculate the capital value of your brain power using this formula. Divide 100 by the current rate of interest that banks charge for lending money. Then multiply the result by the amount of your annual income. As an example, assume that the current interest rate is 5%. Assume your annual income is $50,000. The formula would be as follows. 100 divided by 5 equals 20, and 20 multiplied by 50,000 equals $1 million. Therefore, if you lend out your brain power, your capital, at the same rate as the bank lends money, 5% interest, your brain power is worth $1 million. Competent brains, if effectively marketed, represent a much more desirable form of capital than the money that is required to conduct a business dealing in commodities. This is true because brains are a form of capital that cannot be permanently depreciated by economic depressions, nor can this form of capital be stolen or spent. Moreover, the money that is essential for the conduct of business is as worthless as a sand dune until it has been mixed with efficient brains. The 31 Major Causes of Failure. Life's greatest tragedy consists of men and women who earnestly try and fail. The tragedy lies in the overwhelmingly large majority of people who fail as compared with the few who succeed. I have had the privilege of analyzing several thousand men and women, 98% of whom were classed as failures. My analysis proved that there are 13 major principles through which people accumulate fortunes. Each of the 13 principles of success has its own chapter in this book, and there are 31 major reasons for failure. The 31 causes of failure are listed below. As you go through the list, measure yourself point by point. It will help you to discover how many of these causes of failure stand between you and success. 1. Unfavorable hereditary background. There is little, if anything, that can be done for people who are born with a deficiency in brain power. This is the only one of the 31 causes of failure that may not be easily corrected by any individual. My philosophy can offer only one method of bridging this weakness, through the aid of the MasterMind. 2. Lack of a well-defined purpose in life. There is no hope of success for the person who does not have a central purpose or definite goal at which to aim. 98 out of every 100 of those whom I have analyzed had no such aim. Perhaps this was the major cause of their failure. 3. Lack of ambition to aim above mediocrity. I can offer no hope for those who are so indifferent they do not want to get ahead in life and are not willing to pay the price. 4. Insufficient education. This is a handicap that may be overcome with comparative ease. Experience has proven that the best educated people are often those who are self-made or self-educated. It takes more than a college degree to make you a person of education. Any person who is educated has learned to get whatever they want in life without violating the rights of others. Education consists not so much of knowledge, but of knowledge effectively and persistently applied. You are paid not merely for what you know, but for what you do with what you know. 5. Lack of self-discipline. Discipline comes through self-control. This means that you must control all negative qualities. Before you can control conditions, you must first control yourself. Self-mastery is the hardest job you will ever tackle. If you do not conquer yourself, you will be conquered by yourself. By stepping in front of a mirror, you may see both your best friend and your greatest enemy. 6. Ill health. No person may enjoy outstanding success without good health. Many of the causes of ill health are subject to mastery and control. These, in the main, are overeating of foods not conducive to health, wrong habits of thought or negative thinking, wrong use of and overindulgence in sex, lack of proper physical exercise, an inadequate supply of fresh air due to improper breathing. 7. Unfavorable environmental influences during childhood. As the twig is bent, so shall the tree grow. Most people who have criminal tendencies acquire them as the result of bad environment and improper associates during their childhood or youth. Procrastination. This is one of the most common causes of failure. Procrastination stands within the shadow of every human being, waiting its opportunity to spoil your chances of success. Most of us go through life as failures because we are waiting for the time to be right to start doing something worthwhile. Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand, work with whatever tools you have at your command, and you will acquire better tools as you go along. 9. Lack of persistence. Most of us are good starters, but poor finishers of everything we begin. People are prone to give up at the first signs of defeat. There is no substitute for persistence. The person who makes persistence his or her watchword discovers that failure finally becomes tired and makes its departure. Failure cannot cope with persistence. 10. Negative personality. There is no hope of success for the person who repels people through a negative personality. Success comes through the application of power, and power is attained through the cooperative efforts of other people. A negative personality will not induce cooperation. 11. Lack of control of sexual urges. Sexual energy is the most powerful of all the stimuli that move people into action. Because it is the most powerful of the emotions, if it is controlled, it can be converted into other creative channels. 12. Uncontrolled desire for something for nothing. The gambling instinct drives millions of people to failure. Evidence of this may be found in the Wall Street stock market crash of 1929, during which millions of people tried to make money by gambling on stock margins. Editor's comments. For those who are not familiar with the stock market and buying on margin, the following is a simplified explanation of what caused the crash of '29. The first thing to understand is that prior to the Great Depression there was widespread optimism about the expanding economy. Businesses were booming, and the people who had invested in those companies were making fortunes almost overnight. When the average person saw how much money was being made, they wanted to get in on it, and there was a way for them to do it. Even average people who didn't have enough ready cash to buy stocks could do so because brokers allowed customers to purchase stocks on margin by making what amounted to a down payment. However, part of the purchase agreement stated that when the brokers called in the margin accounts, which they could do at any time, the customers would have to come up with the rest of the cash immediately to pay the balance owing on the original purchase price. That is why Hill used the term gambling when he referred to the stock market. These average people weren't investing in companies. They were betting on the future rise in value. The idea, in the average person's mind, was that they would only have to scrape together enough to pay the margin, which was a small percentage of the full cost. Then when the price of the stock went up, they would sell, which would give them more than enough money to pay the broker the balance owing on the purchase price, and they could pocket the difference. This worked fine as long as stock prices continued to rise, but when the stock market crashed, the stockbrokers called in the margins, and the people who had bought at prices they really couldn't afford suddenly found that they had to come up with the cash. And that was why so many average people got wiped out in the crash of '29. They gambled money they didn't have by buying on margin. This is the end of the editor's comments. 13. Lack of a well-defined power of decision. Those who succeed reach decisions promptly and change them very slowly. Those who fail reach decisions very slowly and change them frequently and quickly. Indecision and procrastination are twins. Where one is found, the other is also usually found. Kill off this pair before they completely tie you to the treadmill of failure. 14. One or more of the 6 basic fears: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love, fear of old age, and fear of death. You will find an in-depth analysis of these 6 basic fears in the final chapter. They must be mastered before you can market your services effectively. 15. Wrong selection of a mate in marriage. This is a most common cause of failure. The relationship of marriage brings people intimately into contact. Unless this relationship is harmonious, failure is likely to follow. Moreover, it will be a form of failure that destroys ambition. 16. Overcaution. The person who takes no chances generally has to take whatever is left when others are through choosing. Overcaution is as bad as undercaution. Both are extremes to be guarded against. Life itself is filled with the element of chance. 17. Wrong selection of associates in business. This is one of the most common causes of failure in business. In marketing personal services, you should use great care to select an employer who will be an inspiration and who is intelligent and successful. We emulate those with whom we associate most closely. Pick an employer who is worth emulating. 18. Superstition and prejudice. Superstition is a form of fear. It is also a sign of ignorance. Successful people keep open minds and are afraid of nothing. 19. Wrong selection of a vocation. You cannot have outstanding success in work that you do not like. The most essential step in the marketing of personal services is that of selecting an occupation into which you can throw yourself wholeheartedly. Although money or circumstances may require you to do something you don't like for a time, no one can stop you from developing plans to make your goal in life a reality. Editor's comments. Most contemporary experts agree with Napoleon Hill's statement that finding the work you love is of key importance in achieving success that is truly rewarding. This concept coincides so well with modern attitudes that it has inspired a number of books, including Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, Wishcraft by Barbara Sher, and Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow by Marcia Sinitar. All 3 books became bestsellers by expanding upon that single concept. This is the end of the editor's comments. 20. Lack of concentration of effort. The jack of all trades seldom is good at any. Concentrate all of your efforts on one definite chief aim. 21. The habit of indiscriminate spending. You cannot succeed if you are eternally in fear of poverty. Form the habit of systematic saving by putting aside a definite percentage of your income. Money in the bank gives you a very safe foundation of courage when bargaining for the sale of personal services. Without money, you must take what you are offered and be glad to get it. 22. Lack of enthusiasm. Without enthusiasm, you cannot be convincing. Moreover, enthusiasm is contagious, and the person who has it under control is generally welcome in any group of people. 23. Intolerance. The person with a closed mind on any subject seldom gets ahead. Intolerance means that you have stopped acquiring knowledge. The most damaging forms of intolerance are those connected with religious, racial, and political differences of opinion. 24. Intemperance. The most damaging forms of intemperance are connected with overeating, alcohol, drugs, and sexual activities. Overindulgence in any of these can be fatal to success. 25. Inability to cooperate with others. More people lose their positions and their big opportunities in life because of this fault than for all other reasons combined. It is a fault that no well-informed business person or leader will tolerate. 26. Possession of power that was not acquired through self-effort. Sons and daughters of wealthy parents, and others who inherit money that they did not earn. Power in the hands of one who did not acquire it gradually is often fatal to success. Quick riches are more dangerous than poverty. 27. Intentional dishonesty. There is no substitute for honesty. You may be temporarily dishonest because of circumstances over which you have no control without permanent damage, but there is no hope for you if you are dishonest by choice. Sooner or later, your deeds will catch up with you, and you will pay by loss of reputation and perhaps even loss of liberty. 28. Egotism and vanity. These qualities serve as red lights that warn others to keep away. They are fatal to success. 29. Guessing instead of thinking. Most people are too indifferent or lazy to acquire facts with which to think accurately. They prefer to act on opinions created by guesswork or snap judgments. 30. Lack of capital. This is a common cause of failure among those who start out in business for the first time. You must have a sufficient reserve of capital to absorb the shock of your mistakes and to carry you over until you have established a reputation. 31. Here, name any particular cause of failure from which you have suffered that has not been included in the foregoing list. Contained in these 31 major causes of failure is the description of practically every person who tries and fails. It will be helpful if you get someone who knows you well to go over this list with you and help you to analyze yourself by each of these causes of failure. Most people cannot see themselves as others see them. You may be one who cannot. Do you know your own worth? The oldest of admonitions is, know thyself. If you market merchandise successfully, you must know the merchandise. The same is true in marketing personal services. You should know all of your weaknesses in order to bridge them or eliminate them entirely. You should know your strengths in order to call attention to them when selling your services. You can know yourself only through accurate analysis. There's a story about a young man applying for a job who was making a good impression until the manager asked him what salary he expected. He replied that he had no fixed sum in mind, lack of a definite aim. The manager then said, "We will pay you all you are worth after we try you out for a week." "I can't accept that," the applicant replied. "I'm already getting more than that where I'm now employed." It may seem funny, but it makes a serious point. Before you even begin to negotiate for a better salary in your present position or begin to seek employment elsewhere, be sure that you are worth more than you now receive. It is one thing to want money. Everyone wants more, but it is something entirely different to be worth more. Many people mistake their wants for their just dues. Your financial wants have nothing whatever to do with your worth. Your value is established entirely by your ability to render useful service or your capacity to induce others to render such service. Take inventory of yourself. Annual self-analysis is essential in the effective marketing of personal services, just like you would take an annual inventory if you were in merchandising. Moreover, your yearly analysis should show a decrease in your faults and an increase in your virtues. You go ahead, stand still. "23. In what ways have I rendered more service and better service than I was paid to render? 24. Have I been unfair to anyone, and if so, in what way? 25. If I had been the purchaser of my own services for the year, would I be satisfied with my purchase? 26. Am I in the right vocation, and if not, why not? 27. Has the purchaser of my services been satisfied with the service I have rendered, and if not, why not? 28. What is my present rating on the fundamental principles of success? Make this rating fairly and frankly, and have it checked by someone who is courageous enough to do it accurately. After you have finished reading through to the end of this book at least once, and you are sure you have assimilated the information in this chapter, you will be ready to create a practical plan for marketing your personal services. In this chapter, you should have found adequate descriptions of every principle essential in planning the sale of personal services. These include the major attributes of leadership, the most common causes of failure in leadership, a description of the fields of opportunity for leadership, the main causes of failure in all walks of life, and the important questions that should be used in self-analysis. This extensive and detailed presentation has been included because it will be needed by you if you are going to earn your riches by marketing your personal services. Those who have lost their fortunes, and those who are just beginning to earn money, have nothing but personal services to offer in return for riches. Therefore, it is essential that you have real, practical information that you'll need to market your services to best advantage. Complete assimilation and understanding of the information will help you to market your services, and it will help you to become more analytical and capable of judging people. The information will be priceless to you if you work in an executive position where you select employees. Where and how to find opportunities to accumulate riches. Now that we have analyzed the principles by which riches may be accumulated, you naturally ask, where can I find the opportunities to apply these principles? Very well. Let us take inventory and see what the United States of America offers the person seeking riches. To begin with, remember that we live in a country where every law-abiding citizen enjoys freedom of thought and freedom of deed unequaled anywhere in the world. Most of us have never taken inventory of the advantages of this freedom. We have never compared our unlimited freedom with a curtailed freedom in other countries. Here we have freedom of thought, freedom in the choice and enjoyment of education, freedom in religion, freedom in politics, freedom in the choice of a business, profession, or occupation, freedom to accumulate and own all the property we can accumulate, freedom to choose our place of residence, freedom in marriage, freedom through equal opportunity to all races, freedom of travel from one state to another, freedom in our choice of foods, and freedom to aim for any station in life for which we have prepared ourselves, even for the presidency of the United States. We have other forms of freedom, but this list gives an overview of the most important freedoms that offer you the opportunity to think and grow rich. The United States is the only country guaranteeing to every citizen, whether native-born or naturalized, so broad and varied a list of freedoms. Next, let us recount some of the blessings that our widespread freedom has placed within our hands. Take the average American family of average income and sum up the benefits available to every member of the family in this land of opportunity and plenty. Food. Next to freedom of thought and deed comes food, clothing, and shelter, the three basic necessities of life. Because of our universal freedom, the average American family has available at its door the choicest selection of food to be found anywhere in the world, and at prices within its financial range. Shelter. This family lives in a comfortable apartment or house, complete with light, heat, water, and many conveniences. The toast they had for breakfast was toasted in an electric toaster, which cost but a few dollars. The apartment is cleaned with a vacuum cleaner that is run by electricity. Hot and cold water is available at all times in the kitchen and the bathroom. The food is kept cool in a refrigerator. Clothes are washed and dried, dishes are cleaned, and numerous labor-saving devices are run on power obtained by putting a plug into a wall socket. The family receives entertainment and information from all over the world 24 hours a day if they want it, by merely flipping a switch on their radio or television or computer. There are other conveniences, but the foregoing list will give a fair idea of some of the concrete evidences of the freedoms that we, of America, enjoy. Clothing. Anywhere in the United States, the family with average clothing requirements can dress very comfortably at a cost that is only a small portion of their earnings. Only the three basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter have been mentioned. The average American also has other options and advantages that are available in return for reasonable effort. The average American has security of property rights not found in any other country in the world. We can place any surplus money in a bank with the assurance that our government will protect it and make good to us if the bank fails. If an American citizen wants to travel from one state to another, he or she needs no passport and no one's permission. You may go when you please, and you may travel by car, train, bus, airplane, ship, or any other method that you can afford. The miracle that has provided these blessings. We often hear politicians proclaiming the freedom of America when they solicit votes, but they seldom take the time or trouble to analyze the source of this freedom. Having no axe to grind, no grudge to express, and no ulterior motives, I will give you a frank analysis of that mysterious, abstract, greatly misunderstood something that gives to every citizen of America more blessings, more opportunities to accumulate wealth, and more freedom of every nature than may be found in any other country. I have the right to analyze the source and nature of this unseen power because I know, and have known for more than half a century, many of the men who organized that power, and many who are now responsible for its maintenance. The name of this mysterious benefactor of mankind is capital. Capital consists not only of money, but also of highly organized, intelligent groups of individuals who plan ways and means of using money efficiently for the good of the public and profitably to themselves. These groups consist of scientists, educators, chemists, inventors, business analysts, publicists, transportation experts, accountants, lawyers, doctors, and other men and women who have highly specialized knowledge in all fields of industry and business. They pioneer, experiment, and blaze trails in new fields of endeavor. They support colleges, hospitals, schools, build good roads, publish newspapers, pay most of the cost of government, and take care of the many details essential to human progress. Stated briefly, the capitalists are the brains of civilization because they supply the entire fabric of which all education, enlightenment, and human progress consist. Money without brains is always dangerous. Properly used, it is the most important essential of civilization. To give you an idea of how important organized capital is, try to imagine that it is your job to provide and prepare a simple family breakfast, but you have to do it without the aid of capital. To supply the tea, you would have to make a trip to China or India. Unless you are an excellent swimmer, you would become rather tired before making the round trip. Then, too, another problem would confront you. What would you use for money, even if you had the physical endurance to swim the ocean? To supply sugar, you would have to take another swim to the Caribbean islands, or a long walk to the sugar beet section of Utah. But even then you might come back without the sugar, because organized effort and money are necessary to produce sugar, to say nothing of what is required to refine, transport, and deliver it to the breakfast table anywhere in the United States. Eggs you could obtain easily enough from nearby farms, but you might have a very long walk to Florida or California and back before you could serve grapefruit juice. You would have another long walk to Kansas or one of the other wheat-growing states when you went after wheat bread. Dry cereal would have to be omitted from the menu, because it would not be available except through the labor of a trained group of workers and suitable machinery, all of which call for capital.